Welcome to Stories for Sleep, your ultimate escape into the world of soothing tales and peaceful dreams. Here, we create stories designed to relax your mind, calm your soul, and help you drift into the most restful sleep. From enchanted forests to mysterious adventures, our stories are perfect for unwinding after a long day. If you're looking for a peaceful way to end your day, you've found the right place. Don't forget to hit the like button, share these calming stories with friends, and subscribe for new bedtime adventures every week. Let's make every night a peaceful one, together. Sweet dreams await. Subscribe now and enjoy a world of relaxation at your fingertips. The moonlit ocean stretched endlessly, its calm waves gently touching the shore of a quiet village. At the edge of the cliff stood the old lighthouse, tall and forgotten. No one dared to go near it after dark. Villagers whispered that a soft, eerie lullaby echoed from the tower every night. Those who listened too closely felt a strange pull, as if the song called them into the darkness. One stormy evening, a young woman named Clara arrived in the village. She was a curious traveler, drawn to tales of the unknown. The locals warned her about the haunted lighthouse, but Clara's adventurous spirit refused to listen. Determined to uncover the mystery, she decided to stay. That night, as the wind howled outside her window, she heard the faint melody of a haunting lullaby be drifting from the lighthouse. Curiosity burned within Clara, and the mysterious song played in her mind. Early the next evening, she prepared to explore the lighthouse. With a lantern in hand, she followed the winding path up the cliff. Each step felt heavier as the song grew louder, filling the air with a mix of beauty and sorrow. Reaching the lighthouse door, Clara found it slightly ajar. The rusty hinges groaned as she pushed it open, revealing a spiral staircase leading upward. The air inside was cold, and the walls were marked with faded carvings of waves and stars. As she climbed the stairs, the lullaby seemed to welcome her, its melody growing clearer with every step. At the top of the staircase, Clara discovered a dusty room filled with forgotten relics. A broken telescope pointed toward the sea, and old journals lay scattered on a wooden table. She opened one, revealing the story of a lonely lighthouse keeper named Elias. Years ago, Elias lost his beloved wife to the sea. Heartbroken, he spent his nights singing to the waves, hoping she might return. As Clara read further, the lullaby changed. It was no longer soothing, it was filled with sorrow and regret. The air felt heavy, and the shadows in the room seemed to move. Clara realized that the song was not just a melody, it was a voice trapped in time, longing for release. A sudden chill swept through the room, and the lantern flickered. Clara turned to see a faint figure standing by the window. It was Elias, the ghost of the lighthouse keeper. His face was filled with sadness, and his voice trembled as he spoke. "You've come to listen to my song," he said, his tone both grateful and mournful. Elias revealed that he was trapped in the lighthouse, his soul bound by the grief of losing his wife. He sang each night, hoping someone would understand his pain and help him find peace. Clara's heart ached for the lonely spirit. She promised to help, though she didn't yet know how. Clara spent the next day gathering stories from the villagers. She learned that Elias's wife had been a sailor, lost in a shipwreck during a violent storm. That evening, she returned to the lighthouse with a seashell from the beach where the ship had sunk. Holding the shell, she spoke softly to Elias. "Your wife loved the sea, but she wouldn't want you to suffer. Let this be a farewell, and may you both find peace." Elias took the shell, his ghostly form shimmering. As he held it close, he sang the lullaby one last time, But this time it was different, filled with love and acceptance. His figure faded into the light, leaving the room warm and quiet. The haunting song was gone, and the lighthouse finally felt at peace. Clara left with a heart full of wonder, knowing she had uncovered and ended the tale of the secret lullaby. Clara thought the mystery of the lighthouse had ended, but whispers began to circulate in the village. Some villagers claimed to hear faint echoes of the lullaby late at night. Though the melody was softer now, it seemed to carry a new message, a call for help. Clara, curious yet cautious, decided to investigate further. She spoke to an elderly woman named Margot, who had lived in the village for decades. Margot revealed a startling secret: Elias was not the only one tied to the lighthouse. There was a child, Margot said, her voice trembling, their daughter. Lost to the sea, too, the realization chilled Clara. Had the lullaby been hiding another story all along? Clara felt an overwhelming sadness for the forgotten child. That evening, she returned to the lighthouse, bringing flowers and a small toy she found in the box. She placed them on the windowsill where the waves could be seen. "Eleanor," she whispered, "your father and mother loved you deeply. It's time to let go of the pain and find peace together." As the night deepened, the lullaby grew louder, filling the lighthouse with an ethereal glow. Two figures appeared, faint but radiant, a man and a little girl. Elias held Eleanor's hand as they looked at Clara with gratitude. "Thank you," Elias's voice echoed softly. "You've given us what we longed for, a way to be together again." The spirits began to fade, their forms dissolving into the moonlight. The lullaby, now a gentle hum, lingered in the air before fading completely. The lighthouse felt lighter, as if its walls no longer carried the weight of sorrow. Clara stood in silence, knowing she had helped a family reunite across time. Determined to uncover the truth, Clara returned to the lighthouse. This time she searched deeper, combing through the old journals and dusty relics. Beneath a loose floorboard, she found a small, weathered box. Inside was a lock of hair tied with a ribbon, a tiny bracelet, and a torn page from a journal. The page described Elias's heartbreak over his child, who had vanished during the storm that claimed his wife. As Clara held the items, the air shifted and the lullaby returned, soft and mournful. A faint voice, lighter than Elias's, seemed to join the song. Clara realized it wasn't just Elias's spirit in the lighthouse. His child was still there, waiting to be remembered. The next morning, Clara spoke with more villagers, piecing together the fragments of the story. It became clear that Elias's child, a little girl named Eleanor, had often played near the cliffs. On the night of the storm, she had followed her mother to the shore, but was swept away before anyone noticed. The next day, Clara shared the full story with the villagers. The tale of Elias and Eleanor spread, transforming the haunted lighthouse into a place of bittersweet memory. Instead of fearing it, the villagers began to cherish its history, leaving flowers and candles at its base in honor of the family's love and loss. Clara prepared to leave the village, her heart full of peace. As she packed her belongings, she glanced toward the lighthouse one last time. The sunlit tower stood tall, its windows reflecting the calm sea. The lullaby was gone, but its memory would remain forever in Clara's heart and in the village's lore. As Clara boarded the train to her next destination, she felt a strange pull to look back. She gazed out the window as the lighthouse disappeared into the horizon. A faint warmth spread through her, as if the spirits of Elias and Eleanor were bidding her farewell. The villagers waved her off, grateful for her bravery and kindness. Clara realized that her journey was not just about solving mysteries, but about healing the wounds of the past. She vowed to continue her travels, seeking out other forgotten stories and bringing them to light. Months later, the lighthouse became a symbol of hope and remembrance. Tourists visited the site, drawn by the tale of the haunting lullaby and the love that bound a family even in death. The villagers lit the lighthouse every evening, its beams stretching across the waves like a guiding star. Clara, now far away, often thought of the lighthouse. She wrote about her experience, sharing the story with others who needed comfort and inspiration. The lullaby had ended, but its legacy lived on, reminding all who heard it that love is stronger than time, sorrow, or even death. Months passed, and Clara's life returned to its quiet routine. Yet memories of the haunted lighthouse often lingered in her thoughts. One day she received a letter from an unknown sender. The envelope was old, with no return address. Inside was a single note: the lighthouse holds more secrets. Return, but beware the shadow that guards them. Clara couldn't ignore the mysterious message. Though hesitant, she felt an irresistible pull to uncover what had been left behind. When she arrived at the village, the air seemed heavier than before. A fisherman stopped her on the path to the lighthouse. His face was pale as he whispered, "You shouldn't have come back. The shadows in the lighthouse aren't as kind as the spirits you helped." Determined, Clara climbed the familiar path to the lighthouse. The place felt colder, and the air inside was thick with an eerie stillness. As she lit her lantern, she noticed something she hadn't seen before: a deep crack in the floor near the spiral staircase. From the crack, a strange, dark mist seemed to rise, curling and twisting unnaturally. Clara felt a chill run down her spine as the shadow began to take shape. Unlike Elias and Eleanor, this presence was menacing. A low, guttural voice echoed through the room. "You should have left this place to the dead," it growled. The shadow swirled closer, but Clara stood her ground. "Who are you? And why are you here?" she demanded, her voice trembling yet firm. The shadow's voice hissed as it revealed its dark truth. It was the spirit of an old sailor who had cursed the lighthouse long before Elias's time. The sailor had been betrayed by his shipmates, left to die at sea, and his vengeful soul had anchored itself to the lighthouse. His anger had poisoned the spirits within, trapping them in endless sorrow. Clara realized that Elias and Eleanor's unrest had been part of this curse. While she had freed them, the shadow's grip on the lighthouse remained strong. It fed on despair and fear, and now it sought to trap Clara as well. She knew she couldn't leave without breaking the curse once and for all. Clara remembered the relics she had found during her last visit: the journals, the carvings, and the shell that had brought Elias peace. She searched the lighthouse again, looking for something that might weaken the shadow's power. In a hidden drawer beneath the staircase, she found a small, rusted lantern. The moment she lit it, the room filled with a warm, golden glow. The shadow recoiled, its form growing weaker. The lantern seemed to hold a piece of the lighthouse's original purpose: to guide and protect. Clara held it high, her voice steady as she spoke. "Your anger does not belong here. This place was built to save lives, not destroy them. Leave and let this lighthouse shine again." The shadow let out a deafening roar, its form twisting violently. It surged toward Clara, but the lantern's light burned brighter, creating a barrier between her and the darkness. Clara closed her eyes, focusing on the memories of Elias and Eleanor, the love they shared, and the peace they had found. The light from the lantern began to pulse, each wave of energy pushing the shadow further back. With one final burst, the shadow let out a shriek and dissolved into the air, leaving behind nothing but silence. The lighthouse seemed to sigh, its walls no longer heavy with grief and anger. The curse had been lifted. As dawn broke, Clara stood at the top of the lighthouse, watching the sun rise over the calm ocean. The lantern's light still glowed softly, a symbol of hope and healing. The villagers gathered below, sensing that the darkness had finally left their home. Clara knew her journey with the lighthouse had come to an end. She placed the lantern carefully in the room, its light a reminder of the love and strength that had conquered the shadows. As she walked away, the villagers cheered, grateful for her courage and determination. The haunted lighthouse was no longer a place of fear. It had become a beacon of resilience, guiding not just ships, but also the hearts of those who heard its story. Clara, with a heart full of peace, continued her journey, ready to uncover the next mystery waiting to be solved. Months after Clara's last visit, the lighthouse had become a symbol of peace for the village. However, something peculiar started happening. Fishermen reported seeing strange lights dancing above the tower late at night. Unlike the eerie glow of the shadow, these lights were soft and inviting, almost playful. Clara, who was now miles away, received a letter from Margot. It read, "The lighthouse sings again, but this time it feels different. You must return." Clara couldn't ignore the letter. Upon her arrival, the villagers greeted her warmly, but their faces were marked with unease. "It's as if the lighthouse is alive," one said. "The lights seem to beckon us, but no one dares go near." Intrigued and slightly wary, Clara decided to explore the mystery once more. As Clara approached the lighthouse, the strange lights appeared, swirling in patterns above the tower. They shimmered in hues of gold and blue, casting an enchanting glow on the surrounding cliffs. Unlike the shadow, these lights felt welcoming, yet they carried an undeniable sense of purpose. Inside, Clara noticed that the lantern she had left behind glowed brighter than before. As she stepped closer, the lights outside seemed to follow her, streaming through the windows and filling the room. It was as if they were trying to communicate. Clara reached out, and for a moment the light surrounded her hand, warm and comforting. "What are you trying to show me?" she whispered, feeling an inexplicable connection. The lights guided Clara to a part of the lighthouse she hadn't explored before. Behind a loose panel in the wall, she discovered a hidden staircase spiraling downward. Carrying the lantern, she descended cautiously. The air grew cooler, and the walls seemed to hum with energy. At the bottom, she found a sealed door with intricate carvings. The carvings depicted the history of the lighthouse, the storm, the spirits, and the shadow. But there was more: images of radiant lights encircling the tower, protecting it from harm. Clara realized the lights were guardians of the lighthouse, perhaps even remnants of the lives it had once saved. She placed the lantern in a small, carved recess on the door, and it swung open, revealing a chamber filled with shimmering crystals. As Clara stepped into the chamber, the lights grew brighter, dancing across the crystals and casting vibrant reflections on the walls. A soft voice echoed, neither male nor female, but resonant and soothing. "You have freed this place from its darkness," it said, "but its legacy is not yet complete. The lighthouse must continue to guide and protect." Clara felt a sense of responsibility. The voice continued, "Take this crystal with you. It holds the lighthouse's light and will guide you on your path. Share its story so others may find hope and courage in its glow." A single crystal, smaller than the rest, floated toward her. Clara took it, feeling its warmth in her palm. With the crystal in her possession, Clara returned to the village, where she shared what she had discovered. The villagers, once afraid of the lighthouse, now saw it as a place of wonder. They began hosting gatherings near the cliffs, sharing tales of the lighthouse's history and its transformation. The crystal, placed in the village square, radiated a gentle light, bringing comfort and unity to the community. People from neighboring towns started visiting, drawn by the stories and the crystal's glow. Clara realized that the lighthouse's true purpose extended beyond guiding ships. It was meant to guide hearts as well. Clara knew it was time to move on, but she left the village with a heart full of gratitude. The lighthouse, once shrouded in sorrow and fear, now stood as a symbol of resilience and hope. As she boarded her train, she looked back one last time. The lights above the tower swirled gently, as if bidding her farewell. The crystal's glow traveled with her, reminding her that even the darkest places could shine again. Clara's journey continued, but the story of the lighthouse lived on, touching the lives of everyone who heard it. The haunted lighthouse was no longer just a legend. It was a testament to the power of light, love, and the courage to face the unknown. Clara traveled far from the village, carrying the lighthouse crystal safely tucked in her satchel. Wherever she went, people seemed drawn to its gentle glow. She shared the story of the haunted lighthouse and the light that had saved it, inspiring everyone who listened. Yet Clara couldn't shake the feeling that her journey with the lighthouse wasn't over. One evening, while resting in a quiet inn by the sea, Clara was approached by an old sailor. His weathered face and kind eyes hinted at a life full of stories. "You're the one who saved the lighthouse," he said softly. Clara nodded. The sailor leaned in closer and whispered, "There are other places like it, places where the light has faded and darkness has taken hold. They need someone like you." The sailor told Clara about the Forgotten Isles, a cluster of small, desolate islands far to the north. Legend spoke of lighthouses there that once guided ships through treacherous waters but had since fallen into ruin. They say the spirits of lost sailors wander there, searching for the light that abandoned them, he explained. Though Clara felt apprehensive, she couldn't ignore the call to help. The crystal in her satchel seemed to glow brighter, as if urging her forward. The next morning, Clara boarded a ship bound for the Forgotten Isles. The journey was long and perilous, with storms battering the vessel, but Clara remained resolute. She knew the light had chosen her for a reason. The ship reached the first of the Forgotten Isles at dusk. The lighthouse there was barely standing, its once proud tower now crumbling and overgrown with vines. The air was thick with an eerie silence, broken only by the distant sound of waves crashing against the rocks. Clara climbed the steep path to the lighthouse, lantern in hand. Inside, the walls were covered in faded carvings, similar to those in the haunted lighthouse she had left behind. As she lit her lantern, a faint voice echoed through the room, "Why have you come?" Clara's heart raced. But she replied, "I'm here to bring back the light." The room seemed to sigh, and a soft glow began to emanate from the carvings, guiding her deeper into the lighthouse. At the top of the lighthouse, Clara found the spirit of its last keeper. Unlike Elias and Eleanor, this spirit seemed fragile, its form barely visible. "The light was stolen," it said mournfully. "Without it, the ships crashed, and the sea claimed their souls." The keeper pointed to an old chest in the corner. Inside, Clara found fragments of a shattered crystal, its pieces dull and lifeless.
The crystal from her satchel began to glow brighter, almost as if it recognized its broken counterpart. Clara carefully placed the fragments near her crystal, and the light began to pulse, mending the broken pieces. Slowly, the lighthouse came alive, its beam cutting through the night like a guardian reborn. The spirit smiled faintly before fading into the light, its purpose fulfilled. Ooh.
As Clara moved from isle to isle, each lighthouse told a similar tale of stolen or extinguished light and spirits trapped by their despair. With every visit, the crystal she carried grew brighter, its energy restoring the lighthouses and releasing the spirits bound to them. Each time, Clara felt the presence of the guardian lights she had first encountered, their whispers encouraging her. By the time she reached the last of the Forgotten Isles, Clara had become a legend herself. Villagers from nearby shores spoke of the woman who carried the light, bringing hope to places abandoned by time. Yet Clara remained humble, knowing she was merely a vessel for the light's power. On her final night in the Forgotten Isles, Clara stood at the top of the last lighthouse she had restored. The beam of light stretched far across the ocean, illuminating the path for countless sailors. The crystal in her satchel now glowed with a steady brilliance, a reminder of the journey she had undertaken. As the wind carried the sound of waves and distant seagulls, Clara felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She knew her work wasn't just about restoring lighthouses, it was about igniting hope in the darkest places. The light had given her purpose, and in return, she had given it a chance to shine again. Clara turned to leave, the crystal still warm in her hand. She knew the journey wasn't truly over. Somewhere, another light might be waiting for her to rekindle it. And so, with the sea as her witness, Clara set off once more, a keeper of light and hope in a world that often forgot how to shine. As Clara sailed away from the Forgotten Isles, the crystal in her satchel hummed with a new energy. It was as though the light had grown stronger with every lighthouse it had touched. But even as she sailed, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that her work was far from complete. The sea stretched endlessly before her, but somewhere, deep within her heart, she felt another call, one that would guide her to yet another forgotten place in need of light.
The crystal glowed softly, pulsing with each passing wave. Clara knew that the beacon of hope she carried had begun to take on a life of its own, guiding her like a true compass. But what would this new journey hold? She wondered if the lighthouses she had already restored would ever call to her again, or if this next path would reveal an even greater mystery. The unknown lay ahead. But Clara felt ready.
After days of sailing, Clara's ship arrived at an unfamiliar island. Unlike the others, this place was eerily quiet, no sounds of birds or crashing waves, only a stillness that seemed to linger in the air. The island was small, its rocky shoreline covered in moss and wildflowers, but the lighthouse that stood tall at the center was dark, as though it had never been touched by the light Clara had restored elsewhere. Clara approached cautiously, feeling a strange sense of urgency. The lighthouse, though sturdy, had a timeless, abandoned feel, and the air around it seemed heavy with secrets. As Clara stepped inside, the temperature dropped, and a shadow fell over her, obscuring the walls. The walls, however, seemed to whisper faintly words Clara couldn't quite make out. She lit her lantern, and immediately the shadows retreated, revealing an inscription on the wall, "The last light sleeps here."
The inscription filled Clara with an unsettling sense of purpose. She ventured deeper into the lighthouse, finding more cryptic messages along the way. Each one hinted at a past long forgotten, a story buried beneath layers of time. As she ascended the spiral staircase to the top, Clara noticed a darkened lantern lying on the floor, untouched for years. It looked almost identical to the one she had first found in the haunted lighthouse. She reluctantly grabbed it from the floor and hurried back to the gallery.
There, in the heart of the lighthouse, Clara saw at a pedestal with an empty slot that seemed to call for the missing piece. Her crystal pulsed, responding to this new revelation. As Clara placed the crystal on the pedestal, a brilliant flash of light filled the room, casting away the darkness. The air grew warmer, and the once silent island began to hum with life, as if the lighthouse itself had awakened. With the light restored, the island transformed before Clara's eyes. The flowers that once appeared dull and withered now bloomed in vibrant colors. The air smelled fresh and alive, and the once still sea now sparkled with a golden hue under the returning light. Clara stepped outside, gazing at the incredible transformation.
As the light continued to shine, the spirit of the last lighthouse keeper appeared before Clara. Unlike the other spirits, this one radiated a calm, serene energy. "Thank you," the spirit whispered. "This light had been lost for centuries, and now it is free once more. You have freed not only the lighthouse, but the island itself." Clara smiled, knowing that her work here was complete. The light had come full circle, bringing life to a place long forgotten.
As Clara prepared to leave the island, the spirit of the keeper approached her one final time. "You have restored the light, and in doing so, you have awakened the heart of the sea," the spirit said. "But there is one last gift I can give you." The spirit raised its hand, and Clara felt a gentle warmth flow into her. Her heart surged with energy, and the crystal in her satchel glowed brighter than ever. "The gift of the eternal light," the spirit continued, "will always be with you, guiding you to those in need. You will never walk alone as long as you carry the light of hope within you." With a final blessing, the spirit faded into the glowing beam of the lighthouse. Clara knew that no matter where her journey took her, she would always carry this light with her, an eternal beacon for those lost in darkness. Clara's journey continued as she sailed back across the vast seas, carrying the light with her in her heart. She had restored countless lighthouses, each one a testament to the power of hope, courage, and the enduring light that could guide anyone through the darkest of times. The islands, once forgotten, had come alive again, their spirits freed and their paths forever illuminated.
Clara knew this was only the beginning. As the eternal keeper of the lighthouse's light, she would continue to seek out those places that needed her help, bringing light to the darkest corners of the world. Wherever there was shadow, she would be there with the light, ensuring that no one would ever be lost again. The lighthouse would never be forgotten again, and neither would she.
Years passed, and Clara's legend spread far and wide. Wherever people spoke of the sea, the light, and the lighthouses, Clara's name was whispered with reverence. She became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even the darkest places could be restored with love and light. Yet, as the seasons changed and time moved forward, Clara began to feel the pull of new shores, new islands that needed her guidance. After many days at sea, Clara's ship reached a mysterious island that seemed to float in the twilight hours. The sun hung low in the sky, casting the island in a strange, perpetual glow. The lighthouse on the island was unlike any she had seen before. It stood tall and proud, but its light was faint, barely a flicker against the thick fog that surrounded it. The air was heavy, filled with an eerie silence that made Clara's skin prickle.
Clara felt a wave of unease wash over her. This island seemed different, its energy unlike anything she had encountered. The fog was thick, and as she approached the lighthouse, she could see no path leading up to it. The land itself seemed reluctant to be touched, but Clara had come for a reason, and she knew she couldn't turn back now. She gathered her courage and began to climb, the faint glow from the lighthouse guiding her forward through the mist.
As Clara reached the top of the lighthouse, she was met by a strange figure. Unlike the friendly spirit she had encountered before, this one was shrouded in shadow. Its face was obscured, and its presence was cold, as though it didn't belong in the world of the living. Clara didn't feel fear, but there was a deep sadness in the air, a sorrow that hung heavy like the fog. "I've waited for you," the figure spoke in a voice that echoed like a distant whisper. "The light here has been fading for centuries. It has never been strong enough to guide the lost souls that wander this isle. But now, with your arrival, perhaps it can shine once more." Clara studied the figure closely. The sadness in its voice was palpable. "Who are you?" she asked softly. The figure paused before replying. "I am the Keeper of Shadows, bound to the lighthouse. The light was stolen from me long ago, and now I cannot rest."
Clara placed her hand gently on the pedestal where the light had once been. She could feel the energy of the keeper's words in the air. There was a deep yearning, a desperate hope for redemption that tugged at Clara's heart. As she reached into her satchel, the crystal in her hand began to glow brightly, reacting to the heavy atmosphere. The keeper's shadowed figure slowly stepped aside as Clara approached the light source.
With a deep breath, Clara held the crystal above the pedestal. The moment it touched the stone, the lighthouse began to glow with an ethereal light, a light that seemed to cut through the fog like a blade. The shadowed figure trembled, and slowly, its form began to change. The dark silhouette shifted, revealing the face of a kind and wise elder, no longer consumed by shadows. "Thank you," the keeper whispered, their voice now warm and full of peace. "You freed me from my endless weight. The light is yours to carry now." With the Keeper of Shadows finally at peace, Clara felt a sense of deep satisfaction fill her heart. She had restored yet another lighthouse, but this one was different. It wasn't just the light she had returned, it was the peace that the Keeper had longed for. The fog that had surrounded the island began to lift, revealing the beauty of the land once more. As Clara made her way back to her ship, the lighthouse stood tall behind her, its light now strong and steady. The island seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, as if it, too, had been waiting for this moment. Clara knew her journey was far from over. As long as there were places like this one forgotten and consumed by darkness, there would always be a need for her and the light she carried. Years passed, and Clara continued her mission, sailing from island to island, lighthouse to lighthouse. She had become a part of the legend now, a living symbol of hope, courage, and the eternal power of light. The crystal she carried never dimmed, always glowing with the warmth of the countless lives it had touched. In every lighthouse she restored, Clara felt the spirits of those who had waited for the light, guiding her forward. She knew that her work would never truly end. There would always be darkness, but as long as there was light, there would always be hope. And Clara, the keeper of the eternal light, would be there to carry it into every corner of the world. Years had passed, and Clara had seen many shores. The light she carried had touched countless places, each one brighter for her efforts. Yet, despite the many islands she had restored, one place still haunted her, the Isle of Eternal Twilight. It had left an imprint on her heart, and the shadows there, though now at peace, seemed to linger in the depths of her thoughts. One evening, as Clara sailed across the vast, open ocean, a strange fog began to creep in from the horizon. It was thick and oppressive, unlike any fog she had ever encountered. Her ship's lantern flickered and dimmed as the mist wrapped around her, obscuring her view. Clara's crystal began to pulse, and a cold chill ran through her. The fog felt alive, and it was pulling her back toward the one place she hadn't fully understood, the Isle of Eternal Twilight. The ship slowly made its way through the thick fog, and soon Clara could see the outline of the Isle of Eternal Twilight rising from the sea. The familiar, eerie glow hung in the sky above it, casting an unnatural light on the island. Clara's heart raced. She hadn't intended to return here, but the pull of the fog of the crystal was undeniable. There was something more to this place, something she had missed the first time. As Clara stepped onto the island's rocky shore, she noticed that the lighthouse no longer shone as brightly as before. The glow had dimmed, and the fog seemed to have settled deeper, as if it was waiting for something. The shadows had returned, creeping silently around the lighthouse, as though the peace she had restored was slipping away. Clara knew that whatever was happening now, it was not natural. She had to find out what had caused the fog and stop it before the island fell back into darkness.
Clara made her way to the lighthouse where the keeper's spirit had once stood. This time, the spirit was nowhere to be found. Instead, Clara saw a new figure, cloaked in a darker shadow. It stood near the base of the lighthouse, watching her with eyes that seemed to glow with an unnatural light. The figure didn't speak, but Clara could feel its presence. It was a malevolent force, unlike any spirit she had encountered.
The air grew heavy as the figure stepped closer. Clara could sense the disturbance in the air, the balance between light and dark beginning to shift. The figure raised its hand, and the shadows around Clara seemed to stretch, reaching out to touch her. Clara held her crystal tightly, willing the light to shine brighter. She had faced darkness before, but this felt different. This was no ordinary shadow. It was something ancient, something tied to the very soul of the island. The figure spoke in a voice that sounded like the whisper of the wind, cold and hollow. "You have awakened the light, but you do not understand its true power," it said. The lighthouse here was never meant to shine. It was a prison, a containment for the darkness that lies at the heart of this island. Clara's heart skipped a beat. She had been so focused on restoring the light, she had never questioned the island's past. The figure continued, "This darkness has been here for centuries, trapped by the light you brought. But now the balance is tipping. The fog is a sign that the prison is weakening." Clara's mind raced. The light she had so carefully tended was now part of a much larger, more dangerous mystery. She had to find a way to restore balance once again before the darkness spread beyond the island.
Clara knew that the only way to stop the darkness from escaping was to uncover the truth behind the lighthouse and the island's curse. She began to explore the lighthouse more thoroughly, searching for any clues that could explain the true purpose of the light. As she reached the top, the light itself seemed to grow colder, its beam no longer warm and comforting. Instead, it flickered in an unsettling rhythm, as if fighting against something invisible.
As Clara examined the lighthouse's lantern, she noticed something hidden within the mechanism, an ancient symbol carved into the stone. It was the same symbol that had appeared on the pedestal where she had placed the crystal years ago. The symbol represented both the light and the darkness, an eternal struggle that had never truly been resolved. Clara realized the truth: the light had never been meant to banish the darkness, it had been designed to contain it. The fog thickened around Clara as she stood before the lighthouse's lantern. The figure of the shadowed keeper appeared once more, this time more solid, more real. "The choice is yours," the figure said, its voice a twisted blend of sorrow and anger. "You can take the light and leave, but the darkness will escape. Or you can destroy the light and free us all from this endless cycle." Clara looked at the crystal in her hand, now glowing brighter than ever before. She knew that the light had been her guide, her protector, but she also understood that it had bound the island in a cycle of pain. The darkness had a purpose, too, and perhaps it was time to end this eternal struggle. With a heavy heart, Clara made her decision. She raised the crystal, and with a single, decisive motion, she shattered it against the cold stone of the lighthouse.
The light faded, and the fog lifted. For the first time in centuries, the island was truly still. The shadowed keeper's form dissolved into the mist, no longer bound to the lighthouse. Clara knew she had made the right choice. The darkness had been freed, but so had the island, and so had she.
The island was silent, its eerie glow fading into the horizon as the first rays of dawn began to break through the clouds. Clara stood alone at the base of the lighthouse, the crystal shattered in her hand. The air around her felt lighter, as though a heavy burden had been lifted. She could feel the warmth of the sun on her skin, and for the first time in many years, she felt a sense of peace. The fog, the shadows, the haunting presence, everything was gone. The island was no longer trapped in the cycle of light and darkness. It was free, and Clara knew that her mission was complete. The Keeper of Shadows had been released from its eternal prison, and the island had found its true balance. But Clara also knew that this was not the end of her journey. The world was full of places that needed her light, and there were many more shores to sail to. She had become a legend, a beacon of hope for those lost in the dark. With the island now at peace, Clara turned her attention to rebuilding the lighthouse. Though the old light had been extinguished, the island needed a new one that would guide lost souls to safety without the burden of shadows. Clara gathered materials from the island, using the resources around her to build a new, more beautiful lighthouse. This lighthouse would be different from the others she had restored. It would be a symbol of hope, not a prison for darkness. Clara worked tirelessly, her hands steady and sure as she crafted the light. As the sun set on the horizon, the lighthouse was complete. Clara stood at the top, gazing out over the calm ocean. The new light shone bright, steady, and pure. It was a beacon for all who sought safety, a light that would never falter.
As the lighthouse light shone across the sea, Clara felt a presence beside her. It was not the shadowed figure or the Keeper of Shadows, but something else. A soft, gentle energy. She closed her eyes and whispered a quiet thank you to the island and to the Keeper. She knew that the island had become a part of her, just as she had become a part of its history. She warned Clara.
The light now belonged to Clara, and it would guide her for the rest of her days. She felt the weight of the keeper's legacy on her shoulders, but it was a weight she embraced. She understood now that the light was not just a tool to chase away darkness, it was a reminder that even in the darkest of places, hope could be found. Clara had not only restored the lighthouse, but she had also restored her own faith in herself and her purpose. The island, once shrouded in mist and mystery, now lay bathed in the golden light of the lighthouse. Clara stood at the edge of the shore, gazing out at the endless horizon. The sea stretched out before her, vast and full of unknowns. She knew her journey was far from over. There were still other islands to visit, other lights to restore, and other souls to guide. With a deep breath, Clara turned away from the lighthouse and made her way back to her ship. She knew that wherever the light called her, she would follow. There would always be another island, another mystery to solve, and another light to restore. But she was ready. The darkness was no longer her enemy, it was simply part of the world, and it could be overcome with light, love, and understanding.
As Clara sailed away from the Isle of Eternal Twilight, she could hear a soft melody carried by the wind. It was the sound of a lullaby, gentle and soothing, like the whispers of the sea itself. Clara closed her eyes, listening to the melody as it wrapped around her. She felt at peace, as though the sea and the lighthouse were singing her a song of thanks.
The lullaby filled her heart with warmth, a reminder of all the souls she had helped along her journey. It was a song of hope, of light, and of the eternal connection between the land and the sea. Clara smiled, knowing that this lullaby would guide her in the days to come, just as the light always had. It was the song of her soul, a reminder that no matter how dark the world might become, there would always be a way to shine. As the ship sailed on, the island grew smaller and smaller on the horizon. The lighthouse, now brighter than ever, stood tall and strong, a beacon of hope for the world. Clara gazed at the light one last time, knowing that her journey had come full circle. The light she had carried for so long had become a part of her, and now it would shine for all to see. The eternal light of the lighthouse was no longer just a symbol of guidance, it was a testament to Clara's strength, her courage, and her unwavering belief in the power of light. As long as there were souls lost in the dark, there would always be someone to guide them home. And Clara, the keeper of the eternal light, would be there to carry the flame, wherever it was needed.
Clara sailed through the night, the lullaby of the sea still echoing in her heart. The sky above was clear, the stars twinkling like diamonds scattered across the vast ocean. As she steered her ship, she couldn't help but notice the way the stars seemed to form a path, a shimmering trail leading her forward. The soft glow of the lighthouse behind her had faded, but now the stars had become her new guide. See, it felt as though the universe itself was calling to her, urging her toward a new adventure.
Clara smiled as she followed the path of stars, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. The sea had become her home, her endless journey and adventure that would never truly end. She knew that wherever the stars led her, there would always be a place for her to shine. It was no longer about chasing away darkness, it was about embracing the light that she had become, sharing it with those who needed it most. Days passed as Clara followed the starlit path. Eventually, she arrived at a new island, one she had never seen on any map. The island was small, its shores lined with jagged rocks, and the air was thick with an eerie silence. As Clara stepped onto the island, she felt an overwhelming sense of being watched. It was a feeling that sent a chill down her spine. The island seemed abandoned, but there was something deeply unsettling about it. She walked cautiously through the dense fog that clung to the island, her steps echoing in the stillness. The further she ventured, the more she felt the island's presence a forgotten place, filled with memories that had long since faded. In the distance, she could hear faint whispers, like voices from another time. It was as though the island itself was alive, holding on to the secrets of those who had come before her. Clara knew that this island held a story that needed to be told, and she was ready to uncover its truth.
Clara continued her journey through the island, guided by the whispers that seemed to grow louder with each step. The voices were not of the living, but of those who had been forgotten, their stories lost to time. As she reached the center of the island, she found a stone structure, overgrown with vines and moss. The stone walls were etched with symbols, strange, ancient symbols that she couldn't decipher, but there was something familiar about them, something that made her heart race with anticipation. She whispered, holding her hand out to him. And then it happened.
As Clara stepped closer, the whispers grew clearer, until they became words she could understand. "You are the one who carries the light," they said. "You are the keeper of forgotten echoes." Clara paused, realizing that the island's secret was now revealed to her. It was not just a place of memories, it was a place where lost souls had gathered, their voices echoing through time. And now, it was her responsibility to listen to their stories and give them the peace they had long been denied. Clara sat in the center of the stone structure, listening to the voices that surrounded her. They spoke of lives lived long ago, of joys and sorrows, of moments forgotten by the world. Each voice was unique, yet they all shared one thing in common: a longing for recognition, for their stories to be remembered. Clara knew that her light could bring them the peace they sought, but she also understood that their stories needed to be told so they could be heard by those still living. With a steady hand, Clara reached for her crystal, feeling its warmth against her palm. She raised it high, and as the light from the crystal filled the air, the voices began to quiet. The forgotten souls gathered around her, their faces now visible in the soft glow. They smiled at Clara, their expressions filled with gratitude. She had heard their stories, and now they were free.
As Clara continued to shine her light, the fog began to lift from the island, revealing its true beauty. The overgrown vines receded, and the stone structure became whole again, its walls gleaming in the light. The forgotten souls, now at peace, began to fade into the air, leaving behind only the memories they had shared with Clara. How can you talk to me?
The island no longer felt abandoned or haunted. It transformed into a place of remembrance, where the voices of the past could live on. Clara knew that she had done her part, but the island would continue to hold the stories of those who had come before. The light she carried had given them a voice, and in return, the island had given her a deeper understanding of the power of memory. As Clara left the island, the starlit path once again appeared before her, stretching out across the vast ocean. The island of forgotten echoes faded into the distance, its memories now carried on the wind. Clara looked up at the stars, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. She had completed another chapter in her journey, but she knew that there would always be more to discover. The eternal journey of light and shadow, of memory and forgetting, was endless. And Clara, the keeper of the light, would continue to sail, following the stars and listening to the echoes of the past. As long as there were souls in need, she would carry the light, sharing it with those who needed it most.
As Clara sailed away from the island of forgotten echoes, the night sky above her was clear, and the stars seemed to shine even brighter. But as she sailed farther into the ocean, something changed. The sea began to grow restless and strange. Low whispers filled the air. Clara listened closely, her heart beating faster as the whispers grew louder. They were coming from the deep waters, as if something from the depths was calling her name.
She felt the pull of the whispers, an irresistible force urging her to turn her ship towards the center of the ocean. The waves churned with a mysterious energy, and Clara knew that she had stumbled upon something far older than anything she had encountered before. The sea, with its secrets, was now guiding her to its depths, and Clara felt an eerie calmness wash over her. This was a place where time and space seemed to blur, a place where the past, present, and future collided. Clara followed the whispers, the ship gliding smoothly through the darkening waters. The sky above seemed to darken as well, as if the very air was holding its breath. Suddenly, the whispers ceased, replaced by an eerie silence that hung heavy in the air. Before her, the sea began to part, revealing an underwater cave, a massive opening in the ocean floor, surrounded by glowing sea creatures. The entrance to the cave was shaped like a giant arch, its edges covered in ancient markings that Clara couldn't understand. Clara knew that this was the Abyssal Gateway, a place whispered about in old sailor legends. It was said that the gateway led to the heart of the ocean, a realm where forgotten truths and lost souls were kept hidden. Though the air was thick with mystery, Clara felt an overwhelming pull to venture inside. She had been called to this place for a reason, and she wasn't about to turn away. With a steady hand on the wheel, she steered the ship into the cave, ready to face whatever awaited her within.
As Clara sailed deeper into the Abyssal Gateway, the waters around her grew darker, and the soft glow from the sea creatures seemed to fade. The air was thick with salt and mystery, and Clara could feel the weight of time pressing down on her. The walls of the cave were lined with strange, bioluminescent markings, and the further she traveled, the more she realized that this was no ordinary cave. It was a gateway to something far beyond the physical world, a realm where the secrets of the ocean were hidden.
In the distance, Clara saw a faint light flickering. She followed it, her heart racing, until she reached a large cavern at the center of the cave. In the middle of the cavern was a giant, glowing pearl, pulsating with a soft, ethereal light. It was the source of the whispers, the heart of the ocean itself. Clara approached it slowly, feeling the pull of its power. The pearl seemed to resonate with her, as if it recognized her presence. She reached out to touch it, her fingers brushing the surface, and in that moment everything around her seemed to freeze. As Clara touched the pearl, a surge of energy shot through her, and the ocean seemed to come alive. The whispers returned, now clearer and more distinct. They spoke of the ocean's ancient history, of civilizations that had risen and fallen beneath its waves, of creatures that had never seen the light of day. The voices were the souls of those lost to the sea, their stories preserved within the pearl. Clara realized that the pearl was not just a treasure, it was a vessel for the memories of all those who had perished in the depths. The souls of the ocean reached out to Clara, their voices filled with both sorrow and gratitude. They had waited for someone like her, someone who could hear their stories and share them with the world. Clara felt the weight of their collective memory, their hopes and regrets, and she knew that this was yet another responsibility she had taken on. She was not just a keeper of light anymore, she was a keeper of the ocean's deepest secrets, entrusted with the stories of those lost to the waves.
As Clara held the glowing pearl, the cavern around her began to shift. The waters stirred, and the entire cave seemed to awaken, as if the ocean itself was alive. The pearl's light grew brighter, illuminating the entire cavern. The souls of the lost sea dwellers swirled around Clara, their forms shimmering in the light. They were no longer just whispers in the darkness. They were a living, breathing part of the ocean's eternal cycle. Ah!
The sea had awakened, and with it came the promise of new beginnings. The pearl, now fully activated by Clara's touch, began to send out waves of energy through the ocean. The tides shifted, and the water's surface glowed with a strange, celestial light. Clara knew that the ocean had chosen her to be its new protector, its new keeper. She could feel the pulse of the sea within her, and she understood now that her journey was far from over. The ocean had secrets to share, and Clara would be the one to listen. Clara withdrew her hand from the pearl, and the light from the cavern began to fade, leaving only the soft glow of the ocean's creatures around her. The tides calmed, and the whispers of the lost souls grew quiet, content in the knowledge that their stories had been heard. Clara felt a deep sense of peace settle within her. She was no longer just a wanderer on the sea, she was its keeper, entrusted with its secrets and its stories. The ship began to sail on its own, guided by the awakened tides. Clara stood at the bow, looking out at the endless horizon before her. She knew that her journey would continue, that she would be called to new places and new challenges. But for now, she was content, knowing that she had unlocked the heart of the ocean and become its protector. The sea would always have a place for her, and she would always have a story to tell.
Clara's ship, now guided by the awakened tides, sailed smoothly under the starry sky. As the ocean shimmered, the whispering voices grew faint, leaving her with a deep sense of fulfillment. Yet, something stirred inside Clara, a subtle call from the lighthouse. It was as if the light itself beckoned her back, drawing her toward the shore she had once left behind. The whispers from the deep had quieted, but the lighthouse's glow remained ever so vivid in her mind.
A distant land appeared on the horizon, bathed in the soft glow of the lighthouse's light. The shoreline was eerily silent, save for the gentle lapping of the waves against the shore. Clara knew her journey was not truly over. The lighthouse still had more to reveal. As the ship approached the shore, Clara felt the undeniable pull of the place where her adventure had begun, and she steered the ship toward it, her heart heavy with both anticipation and the weight of the unknown. The ship crept closer to the land, and Clara could see the outlines of the lighthouse against the night sky, its beam cutting through the darkness like a sharp sword. The air grew thick with mystery, and the sound of waves crashing against the rocky shore echoed in her ears. The shoreline seemed different than she remembered. The sand was darker, and the trees that once stood tall were now bent and twisted, as if the island itself had changed. It was a place caught between time, a place where the past and present collided.
Clara stepped off the ship onto the darkened shore, the sand cool beneath her feet. She looked up at the lighthouse, its light still pulsing, guiding her forward. But this time the light did not seem welcoming. It seemed as though it was guarding something, as if it was waiting for her to unlock yet another secret. Clara walked toward the lighthouse with a mix of caution and curiosity, aware that the journey ahead would reveal things far more dangerous than anything she had encountered before.
The path leading to the lighthouse was hidden beneath tangled vines and twisted trees. The air around Clara seemed to grow colder as she ventured deeper into the island, the ground soft and uneven beneath her feet. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant sound of the lighthouse's beams sweeping across the land. It felt as though the entire island was watching her, waiting for her to uncover the truth buried beneath its soil. Clara's heart beat louder in her chest as she felt the pull of the light grow stronger with each step. As she reached the base of the lighthouse, Clara noticed a small, weathered door tucked away beneath the shadow of the structure. It was almost invisible, hidden by the overgrowth of time. She hesitated for a moment, her hand hovering above the door's rusted handle. Something told her that this door would lead her to the final piece of the mystery, but it also felt as though once she opened it, there would be no turning back. With a steady breath, Clara gripped the handle and turned it, the door creaking open. Inside the lighthouse, Clara was greeted by a thick, musty air. The walls were lined with old books and faded maps, each one showing the history of the lighthouse and the island. The chamber was dimly lit by the faint glow of the lighthouse's beam, casting long shadows across the room. At the far end of the chamber was a large, ancient chest, covered in dust and cobwebs. Clara knew that the chest held the key to the final mystery, the secret that had been hidden for so long.
With trembling hands, Clara approached the chest. She could feel the weight of its history, the countless secrets it held within. The moment she touched the chest's rusty lock, a wave of energy surged through her, and the room seemed to pulse with life. The chest creaked open slowly, revealing a set of old, weathered journals. Each one was filled with writings in a language Clara could barely understand, but she could sense their importance. These journals were the key to unlocking the lighthouse's true purpose, and Clara knew that they held the final piece of the haunting lullaby.
Clara opened the first journal, and the words seemed to come alive on the page. As she read, the room around her seemed to fade, and the sound of a soft lullaby echoed in her ears. The lullaby was haunting and beautiful, a melody that resonated deep within her soul. It told the story of a great tragedy, how the lighthouse had once been a place of refuge for lost souls, a guiding light for sailors stranded in the storm. But as time passed, the lighthouse's light became a curse, drawing ships to their doom. The lullaby was the voice of the souls trapped within the light, singing for release. Clara closed the journal with a sense of awe and sorrow. She understood now the lighthouse was not just a place of light, it was a prison for the souls lost to the sea. The lullaby had been a cry for help, a plea for someone to break the curse and free them. Clara had come to this island not just as a keeper of secrets, but as the one who would finally break the cycle. She knew her task was not over yet. The lullaby's call still echoed in her heart, urging her to finish what she had started. Clara stepped away from the chest, her mind racing with the revelations she had uncovered. The lighthouse was no longer just a mysterious structure, it was a symbol of the lost souls who had perished in the ocean's depths, their spirits bound to the light. The lullaby was their song, their final plea for freedom. And Clara, now bound to their fate, knew that she would have to make a choice. She took a deep breath and walked back to the lighthouse's beam, her eyes fixed on the light as it swept across the darkened land. The lullaby seemed to grow louder, urging her forward. Clara closed her eyes and began to hum along, her voice blending with the melody of the lost souls. As she sang, the lighthouse's beam began to flicker, and the air around her grew lighter. The spirits of the lighthouse at last found peace. Clara had broken the curse, and the lullaby had come to its final, peaceful end. The lighthouse was no longer a prison, it was a place of rest for the souls that had once been lost.
As the final note of the lullaby faded into the night, Clara stood alone on the rocky shore, gazing up at the now still lighthouse. The once vibrant beam had dimmed, no longer searching for lost souls. The air around her felt lighter, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. The island, once filled with an eerie sense of dread, now seemed peaceful. Bathed in the soft light of the rising sun, Clara could feel the whispers that had tormented her for so long vanish into silence.
For the first time since she had arrived, Clara felt at peace. She walked along the shore, her steps light as she took in the beauty of the transformed island. The haunting lullaby that had once echoed through the air was now a distant memory, replaced by the sounds of nature. Birds sang overhead, and the wind carried the scent of salt water and blooming flowers. Clara knew that the lighthouse's light had fulfilled its purpose, guiding her to the truth and, in the end, to peace. Clara looked back at the lighthouse, its once ominous presence now a symbol of the journey she had taken. The island had transformed, and so had she. She had come to break a curse, to silence the haunting lullaby that had tormented the spirits trapped within the light. But in doing so, she had discovered a part of herself she hadn't known existed, a courage to face the unknown, to embrace the mysteries of the world without fear.
With a deep breath, Clara turned away from the lighthouse, her heart filled with a new sense of purpose. The adventure had come to an end, but she knew that her life was only just beginning. The secrets of the lighthouse were no longer hers to protect, but the lessons it had taught her would stay with her forever. Clara had come to the island seeking answers, but she had left with a deeper understanding of herself and the world around her.
As Clara sailed away from the island, the lighthouse slowly faded from view, its once bright light now a memory on the horizon. The sea was calm, and the ship glided smoothly across the water. Clara sat on the deck, gazing out at the vast ocean, feeling the weight of the island's legacy in her heart. She knew that the lighthouse would remain in her thoughts forever, but she also knew that she had fulfilled its purpose. The spirits that had been trapped within the light were free, and the haunting lullaby would never be heard again. The journey had changed her, and Clara understood now that sometimes the greatest mysteries weren't meant to be solved, they were meant to be experienced. The island had been a place of darkness, but it had led her to a light of her own, one that burned brightly within her soul. Clara had learned that every ending was simply the beginning of a new chapter, and the world was full of endless possibilities waiting to be explored.
As the ship sailed farther from the island, Clara felt a strange pull toward the sea, as if the ocean itself was calling to her. The gentle rocking of the boat was soothing, and she closed her eyes, letting the sound of the waves calm her mind. She thought about all she had seen and experienced on the island: the lighthouse, the lullaby, the spirits, and the curse that had been broken. But now, she felt as though the sea was beckoning her to another adventure.
The winds began to shift, and Clara stood at the edge of the ship, looking out into the horizon. A new chapter was unfolding before her, and though she didn't know where it would lead, she felt ready to face whatever came next. The secrets of the lighthouse were now behind her, but the mysteries of the world were still out there, waiting to be discovered. Clara's heart beat with excitement as she realized that her journey had only just begun. As Clara gazed out over the vast expanse of the ocean, a sense of tranquility washed over her. She had faced the unknown and come out stronger on the other side. The haunted lighthouse, with all its secrets and mysteries, was now a part of her past, a chapter she would never forget. But she also knew that the lessons learned on the island were not just about solving mysteries, they were about facing fears, embracing uncertainty, and finding peace in the most unexpected places.
For the first time in a long while, Clara felt at peace with herself. She had entered the lighthouse as a curious adventurer seeking answers, but she had left it as a woman who understood the deeper truths of life. The island had shown her that sometimes the answers we seek are not always the ones we expect, and that the journey itself is often more important than the destination. Unlike Willow and those around her, Clara realized that her journey, more than anything, was what she found along the way.
As the ship sailed onward, the lullaby that had once haunted Clara's dreams seemed to fade away, replaced by the natural rhythm of the ocean. The soft whispers of the sea carried with them a sense of calm, a reminder that life was constantly moving forward, just as the waves never stopped rolling onto the shore. Clara closed her eyes once more, feeling the steady sway of the boat beneath her, and let the melody of the ocean carry her into a peaceful, restful sleep. The journey of the haunted lighthouse had ended, but Clara knew that she would always carry the lessons it had taught her. The spirits of the lighthouse were at peace, and the lullaby that had once called to her was now a quiet memory. Clara had broken the curse, freed the souls, and in doing so, had found her own sense of freedom. The ocean, with all its mysteries, would always be a part of her now, and she was ready to embrace whatever came next. As Clara continued her journey across the open sea, she couldn't help but reflect on the events that had unfolded on the haunted island. The memories of the lighthouse still lingered in her mind, like the echo of a forgotten song. She had set out to uncover its secrets, and in doing so, had come face to face with the very essence of fear, courage, and redemption. The spirits of the lighthouse had found peace, but Clara knew there would always be whispers in the wind, reminders of the past.
With each passing wave, she felt more connected to the world around her. The sea, which had once seemed vast and intimidating, now felt like an old friend, a constant companion. It had guided her through the darkness of the lighthouse and into the light of understanding. Clara had come to realize that, much like the ocean, life had its ebb and flow, moments of calm and moments of storm. And it was in embracing both that one could truly find peace. During one of the dreary winters, Clara had gone back to her playroom to get prepared for winter picnic, moments of storm and moments of stillness.
As Clara gazed into the horizon, she saw the first signs of land in the distance. It was an unfamiliar place, one that called to her like the lighthouse had once done. Something within her stirred, and for the first time since leaving the island, she felt a sense of excitement rather than apprehension. The journey was far from over. She had faced the unknown and conquered the darkness, but now the world was wide open, full of possibilities. The secrets of the lighthouse had been revealed, and the lullaby was no longer a haunting refrain, but a distant memory. But the lessons she had learned on the island would continue to shape her path. Clara understood now that every story, every mystery, was part of a much larger journey. What lay ahead was unknown, but Clara was no longer afraid. She had found her courage, and with it, the strength to face whatever the future held. As the ship docked at the new land, Clara felt the weight of the lighthouse's legacy settle within her. She had kept her promise to the spirits trapped within its walls, and in doing so, had fulfilled her own purpose. The lullaby that had once tormented her was now a symbol of her resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always a way to find the light. Clara stepped off the ship, her feet touching solid ground for the first time in days. The air was different here, fresher, with a hint of something sweet in the breeze. The land was lush and green, a stark contrast to the eerie, barren island she had just left behind. But Clara knew that this place, like the lighthouse, held its own secrets, and with every step she took, she was ready to uncover them, one by one. As night fell over the new land, Clara found herself walking along a quiet path, the sound of crickets and rustling leaves filling the air. She paused, a familiar sensation creeping over her. Something was calling her. It wasn't the lighthouse, but the lullaby. The soft, melodic tune seemed to echo in the wind, as though it had followed her here. Clara closed her eyes, allowing the song to wash over her. This time, however, it didn't frighten her. Instead, it comforted her, like an old friend offering solace after a long journey. As the ship docked at the new land, Clara felt the weight of the lighthouse's legacy settle within her. She had kept her promise to the spirits trapped within its walls, and in doing so, had fulfilled her own purpose. The lullaby that had once tormented her was now a symbol of her resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always a way to find the light. Clara stepped off the ship, her feet touching solid ground for the first time in days. The air was different here, fresher, with a hint of something sweet in the breeze. The land was lush and green, a stark contrast to the eerie, barren island she had just left behind. But Clara knew that this place, like the lighthouse, held its own secrets, and with every step she took, she was ready to uncover them, one by one. As night fell over the new land, Clara found herself walking along a quiet path, the sound of crickets and rustling leaves filling the air. She paused, a familiar sensation creeping over her. Something was calling her. It wasn't the lighthouse, but the lullaby. The soft, melodic tune seemed to echo in the wind, as though it had followed her here. Clara closed her eyes, allowing the song to wash over her. This time, however, it didn't frighten her. Instead, it comforted her, like an old friend offering solace after a long journey. The song, she realized, was not a curse, it was a gift. A reminder of her strength, her ability to overcome the darkness, and her connection to the spirits of the lighthouse. Clara smiled softly, knowing that no matter where she went, the lullaby would always be with her. It was a part of her now, woven into the fabric of her soul, and she would carry it with her into whatever new adventures lay ahead. The next morning, Clara woke with a sense of purpose. The land she had arrived at was peaceful, untouched by the darkness of the lighthouse. Yet Clara felt an undeniable pull to explore further. The past had shaped her, but it was the future that beckoned. She knew her time in this new place was just the beginning of another chapter, one that she would write herself. As she walked through the village, Clara felt a sense of belonging she hadn't felt in a long time. The people here were kind and curious, and they welcomed her with open arms. But Clara kept her own story close to her heart, knowing that the journey of the lighthouse and the lullaby was hers alone. She would never forget the lessons learned on that haunted island, but she also knew that her story was far from over. The world was full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered, and Clara was ready to face them all. As Clara sat by the shore once more, watching the waves roll in, she realized that the lullaby had come full circle. The haunting melody that had once filled her nights with fear had now become a part of her, a symbol of her growth. The lighthouse, the spirits, the curse it had all led her here, to this moment of quiet reflection. Clara smiled, knowing that she had found peace, not only within the world around her, but also within herself. The journey had been long, filled with challenges and mysteries, but it had also been a journey of self-discovery. The secret lullaby of the haunted lighthouse had taught her to face the unknown with courage, to embrace the darkness and find the light within it. And now, as the sun set on the horizon, Clara knew that the lullaby had finally come to rest. It was no longer a haunting melody, it was a sweet, peaceful song that would stay with her always. Clara woke early, the golden light of dawn streaming through her window. For the first time in days, she felt a sense of calm that she hadn't known in a long while. The land was peaceful, and the memories of the haunted lighthouse seemed to fade with each passing moment. Yet, the lullaby still lingered softly in her mind, like the last note of a song that hadn't quite finished. She took a deep breath, welcoming the fresh air that filled her lungs and the new beginning that lay before her. The village was just waking up, with people going about their daily routines. Clara joined them, feeling like a stranger who was beginning to belong. As she walked through the streets, she couldn't help but smile at the simplicity of it all. There were no more haunted whispers, no more eerie cries from the lighthouse. It was just her and the open world, ready for whatever came next. As Clara wandered through the village, her heart skipped a beat when she saw a familiar face in the crowd. It was someone from her past, someone she never expected to see again. It was Captain Marlowe, the man who had once led the ship that had taken her to the haunted island. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. The last time they'd seen each other had been at sea, before everything had changed. Captain Marlowe walked toward her, a knowing smile on his face. "I had a feeling I'd find you here," he said softly. Clara was surprised, but also relieved. There was something comforting about his presence, something that reminded her of the strength she had discovered within herself. The captain didn't need to ask about the island. He knew she had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. Instead, he simply offered her a friendly hand. Clara and Captain Marlowe spent the day together, exchanging stories and catching up on lost time. He told her of his travels since they had parted, and she shared her experiences on the island, though she left out the darker details. They both knew that some stories were meant to remain untold, kept safely within the heart. As the sun set, they sat by the shore, the sound of the waves lapping gently against the rocks. "It seems like you've found a place where you can finally rest," Captain Marlowe said, his voice thoughtful. Clara nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "It feels like I've come full circle," she replied. "The lighthouse may be behind me, but its lessons will stay with me forever. I'm ready to start a new chapter, and who knows where it will lead." Captain Marlowe smiled, his eyes reflecting the same quiet understanding that Clara had felt for so long. Together, they had faced the unknown, and now they were ready for whatever came next. As the night grew darker, Clara sat alone, thinking about everything she had been through. The lighthouse, the lullaby, the spirits, it all seemed like a distant memory now. But Clara knew she would never forget the journey. She had learned so much about herself, about strength, courage, and the importance of facing fears head-on. The lullaby had been a haunting melody, but it had transformed into something much deeper, a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit. She stood up and walked to the edge of the village, where the land met the sea. The moonlight reflected off the water, casting a silvery glow on everything it touched. Clara closed her eyes and whispered a promise to the wind, a promise that she would carry the lessons of the lighthouse with her forever. It was her silent vow, a pledge to never forget the journey that had shaped her, and to always face the unknown with an open heart. Days passed, and Clara found herself adjusting to life in the village. The memories of the haunted lighthouse still hovered in the background, but they no longer held the same power over her. Instead, they had become a part of her story, woven into the fabric of her being. The lullaby no longer filled her nights with fear, but with a quiet sense of comfort, as if it was always there to guide her, no matter where she went. One evening, as Clara sat by the water, Captain Marlowe joined her. They didn't need words, their silence spoke volumes. It was a quiet understanding between two souls who had shared an extraordinary journey. The lighthouse, though distant, had forged an unspoken bond between them, a bond that would last forever. And as the night grew still, Clara felt the lullaby, like a soft breeze, wrapping around her heart, reminding her that some stories never truly end, they simply evolve. Clara awoke to the sound of birds singing, the sun casting its golden rays across the sky. She smiled, feeling at peace for the first time in a long while. The lighthouse was behind her, and the lullaby had finally become a part of her, not a haunting melody, but a beautiful, eternal song. It would always be with her, as would the memories of the spirits and the lessons they had taught her. As Clara walked toward the shore, she took one last look at the village, knowing it was time to move on. The world was full of new adventures, new mysteries to uncover, and Clara was ready. With a heart full of courage and a soul touched by the magic of the lighthouse, she stepped forward into the unknown, ready to write the next chapter of her journey. Clara stood at the edge of the village, gazing out at the vast expanse of the sea. The sun had begun to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. The lighthouse was far behind her now, just a faint silhouette against the fading light. But even from this distance, Clara could feel its presence, quiet and watchful. It was no longer a place of fear for her, but a symbol of everything she had overcome. She had faced the darkness, and now she was ready to embrace the light. As the breeze ruffled her hair, Clara felt a sense of freedom. The world was open to her, full of endless possibilities. The lullaby that had once echoed through her dreams now felt like a distant memory, a song that had brought her to this moment. With a deep breath, Clara knew that the journey ahead would be different. The haunted lighthouse was just one chapter in her story, and she was determined to write the next one with courage and hope. The next morning, Clara packed her belongings and said her goodbyes to the village. There was a sense of sadness in the air, but also a sense of excitement. The villagers had embraced her, and she had become a part of their lives. But Clara knew that her path lay beyond the village, in places she had yet to discover. The open road called to her, and she couldn't ignore it. Clara's journey took her through forests and across rivers, each step bringing her closer to something new. She met people along the way, each with their own story to tell, and she listened with an open heart. There were times when the path seemed uncertain, when the shadows of the past crept into her thoughts. But every time that happened, the lullaby would return to her, a reminder that she was stronger than her fears. As the breeze ruffled her hair, Clara felt a sense of freedom. The world was open to her, full of endless possibilities. The lullaby that had once echoed through her dreams now felt like a distant memory, a song that had brought her to this moment. With a deep breath, Clara knew that the journey ahead would be different. The haunted lighthouse was just one chapter in her story, and she was determined to write the next one with courage and hope. One afternoon, while walking through a dense forest, Clara stumbled upon a hidden path. It was narrow and winding, leading deep into the heart of the woods. Something about it felt mysterious, as if it was calling to her. Without hesitation, Clara followed the path, her footsteps light and steady. The trees whispered above her, and the air seemed thick with magic. She didn't know where the path would lead, but she trusted that it was part of her journey. After what felt like hours, Clara reached the end of the path. Before her lay a meadow, bathed in soft, golden light. Flowers of every color bloomed around her, and the air was filled with a sweet, soothing fragrance. It was as though the meadow existed outside of time, untouched by the world around it. Clara stepped into the meadow, her heart filled with peace. In the center of the meadow stood an ancient tree, its branches stretching high into the sky. The tree seemed to hum with energy, as if it had a secret to share. Clara approached it, her steps slow and deliberate. She reached out and touched the bark, feeling a warmth spread through her fingers. It was then that she heard it, the lullaby. Soft and gentle, it flowed through the air like a river of sound, familiar yet new. Clara closed her eyes, allowing the music to fill her soul. It was the same lullaby, but it had changed, becoming a part of her in ways she hadn't yet understood. As Clara stood there, listening to the lullaby, a soft voice broke through the melody. "You've come far, child," the voice said, warm and kind. Clara looked around but saw no one. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The voice seemed to come from the tree itself. "I am the guardian of this place," it replied. "You have been chosen to protect the secrets of the lighthouse, to carry its lessons with you." Clara felt a shiver run down her spine, but it was not a feeling of fear. It was as if she had always known this moment would come. The guardian's words felt like an ancient truth, one that had been waiting for her to uncover. "I am ready," Clara said, her voice steady. The guardian's laughter echoed softly around her, like the wind through the leaves. "Then your journey is just beginning," the voice replied. "You are the keeper now. The lullaby will always guide you, but it is you who must write the next chapter." With the guardian's words echoing in her mind, Clara left the meadow, a new sense of purpose settling in her heart. The lullaby had always been a guide, a reminder of her strength, but now it was more than that. It was a symbol of her responsibility, her new role in the world. She was no longer just a traveler, she was a protector of the secrets of the lighthouse. As Clara continued her journey, She knew that there would be challenges ahead, but she was no longer afraid. The lullaby would always be with her, a constant reminder that she was never truly alone. The road ahead was long, and the mysteries of the lighthouse were far from over. But Clara was ready. She had embraced her role, and with each step, she was writing the next chapter of her extraordinary journey. As Clara continued her journey, the weather began to change. The once calm skies turned dark and heavy, with clouds swirling ominously above her. The air grew colder, and the wind picked up, howling through the trees. Clara could feel the storm approaching, but she wasn't afraid. She had faced many challenges before, and this one would be no different. She knew that the lighthouse was close, its shadow now looming on the horizon. The storm was a reminder of the power it held, both in the world and within her. Clara's footsteps quickened as the wind began to whip around her, but she kept moving forward. The lullaby seemed to whisper in the wind, guiding her through the growing chaos. She trusted in it, as she had always done. The storm raged as Clara reached the edge of the cliff where the lighthouse stood. Its light flickered in the distance, barely visible through the sheets of rain. The waves crashed violently against the rocks below, and the sky flashed with lightning. Clara's heart raced, but she didn't hesitate. She was drawn to the lighthouse, as though the storm itself was pushing her toward it. She climbed the narrow, slippery path leading up to the lighthouse, her hands gripping the wet stone walls for balance. The wind howled like a beast, and the sound of the ocean below echoed through her ears. When she reached the door of the lighthouse, she found it standing open, as if waiting for her. She stepped inside, her heart pounding in her chest, and the door slammed shut behind her. Inside the lighthouse, Clara was greeted by an eerie silence. The walls were cold and damp, and the air felt thick with secrets. The light at the top of the tower flickered uncertainly, casting long shadows across the room. Clara climbed the spiral staircase, each step creaking under her weight. The higher she went, the more the whispers of the lullaby seemed to echo through the tower. At the top of the lighthouse, Clara found the old lantern, its flame struggling against the wind. It had been years since it had been lit, but now it burned brighter than ever. Clara reached out, her fingers trembling, and gently adjusted the wick. As she did, a soft voice filled the air. It was the lullaby, more powerful than she had ever heard it before. It swirled around her, wrapping her in its soothing melody. The voice of the lullaby seemed to speak directly to Clara's soul. "You have come far, child," it whispered. "But there is more to this place than you know. The lighthouse holds a secret, one that only the true keeper can unlock." Clara's heart raced as the words echoed in her mind. She had always known there was something more to the lighthouse, something deeper. She had felt it in her bones, in every step of her journey. The flame of the lantern flickered once more, and the room grew even colder. Clara's breath came out in visible puffs as she stepped closer to the lantern. The lullaby hummed louder, guiding her actions. With a deep breath, Clara touched the lantern's base, feeling the hidden mechanism beneath her fingers. She turned it, and a hidden compartment slowly opened, revealing an old, faded book. The cover was adorned with strange symbols, and Clara's heart skipped a beat as she realized that this book held the key to the lighthouse's greatest mystery. Clara carefully opened the book, its pages yellowed with age. As she flipped through the pages, she found detailed drawings of the lighthouse, along with strange writings in a language she didn't recognize. But at the end of the book, there was a single, blank page. Clara's fingers hovered over the page, and as she did, the lullaby seemed to fade, leaving only the sound of her own heartbeat in the quiet. Suddenly, the page began to glow faintly, and words slowly appeared before her eyes. It was as if the book was speaking to her, revealing its secrets. The words were written in the same strange language, but Clara could understand them. The keeper's secret is not just to protect the lighthouse, the book whispered. It is to ensure that the song never fades, that the lullaby continues to guide those who are lost. Only the keeper can unlock the true power of the light. Clara's mind raced as she absorbed the meaning of the words. The lullaby was not just a song, it was a force, a power that could guide the lost and protect the lighthouse from darkness. Clara understood now that her role was not just to protect the lighthouse, but to preserve the lullaby's magic for generations to come. But with this knowledge came a great responsibility. Clara knew that she would have to face her greatest test yet. The book had warned her that the lullaby's magic could be lost if the wrong hands took control of it. She was the only one who could keep it safe, and she would have to confront the darkness that had tried to claim the lighthouse in the past. The storm outside seemed to grow stronger, as if the very forces of nature were testing her resolve. As the storm intensified, Clara felt the presence of something dark and ancient stirring in the shadows. The lighthouse seemed to groan under the weight of the storm, and the air grew thick with tension. Clara stood tall, her fingers wrapped tightly around the book. The lullaby began to hum once again, but this time it was different. It was different. It was a battle cry, a call to arms. Clara stepped forward, her heart steady and her resolve unshaken. She had come too far to back down now. The darkness that sought to claim the lighthouse would not prevail. With each step, Clara felt the power of the lullaby growing stronger, filling her with courage. She was ready to face whatever came next. The battle between light and dark had begun, and Clara knew that she was the only one who could win. Clara reached the lantern, the heart of the lighthouse's power. The light flickered and struggled, but Clara knew what she had to do. She placed the book in front of the lantern, and as she did, the lullaby swelled in volume, filling the tower with its powerful song. The light in the lantern burned brighter than ever before, and the storm outside seemed to quiet. The darkness retreated, and Clara felt the power of the lullaby coursing through her veins. The battle was over. The lighthouse was safe, and the lullaby's magic was secure. Clara had passed the test, and she had proven herself as the true keeper of the lighthouse. As the storm finally calmed, Clara stood in the light, knowing that her journey was far from over. The lullaby would always guide her, but now she was ready to share its song with the world. With the storm finally subdued, Clara stood at the top of the lighthouse, her heart still racing from the intensity of the battle. The once wild winds had calmed, and the waves crashing against the rocks seemed less threatening. The soft glow of the lighthouse's light now felt warm, comforting, as though it was embracing the world once again. Clara closed her eyes, taking in a deep breath, and felt the tension in her shoulders ease. The lullaby that had once felt so distant now sang in perfect harmony with the ocean breeze. It was a song of victory, of peace restored. Clara knew the lighthouse had been saved, but she also knew there was a new chapter to be written. The story of the lighthouse was far from over, and she had become its true keeper, guarding its light and protecting the magic that had saved her. As Clara descended from the tower, the light behind her seemed to pulse with a gentle rhythm, almost as if it was alive. The path leading down the lighthouse was now bathed in a soft glow, and the air around her felt lighter. The once dark and eerie atmosphere had been replaced by a sense of calm, as though the lighthouse itself was welcoming her home. Clara looked out over the ocean, watching as the first rays of dawn began to pierce the sky. The storm had passed, and the world seemed peaceful once again. But Clara knew that this new peace would not last forever. There would always be challenges, more tests to face. She wasn't afraid. The lullaby had prepared her for whatever lay ahead. As Clara made her way through the lighthouse, she noticed a faint glow coming from one of the old rooms at the base of the tower. It was the room she had never dared to enter before, the one that had always felt like it held more secrets than she could ever uncover. But now, with the power of the lullaby coursing through her, Clara felt a deep sense of curiosity stirring within her. She stepped into the room, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The walls were lined with dusty shelves filled with old books and artifacts, each one telling a story of the lighthouse's past. But one object caught her eye. It was a small, ornate box, resting on a pedestal at the center of the room. Clara approached it slowly, her fingers brushing against the cool surface. She had no idea what the box contained, but she knew that it held something important, something that could change everything. Clara examined the box closely. It was covered in strange carvings, similar to those she had seen in the book she found earlier. The symbols seemed to shift and move before her eyes, as though they were alive. Clara placed her hands on the box, feeling a strange warmth radiating from it. She knew this was the moment when everything would come full circle. With a deep breath, Clara turned the key she had found in the book, and the box clicked open. Inside there was a small crystal pendant glowing with an ethereal light. Clara held it in her hands, feeling its power surge through her. The pendant was more than just a piece of jewelry, it was a key to the next chapter of her journey. The lullaby had brought her here, but now it was up to her to uncover the true purpose of this pendant. As Clara held the pendant, memories flooded her mind. She saw visions of the lighthouse's history, its long line of keepers, all of whom had passed down the responsibility to the next generation. She saw the first keeper, a woman whose face was obscured by shadows, singing the lullaby to calm the storm. Clara realized that the pendant was a symbol, a connection to the first keeper, and it was now her turn to continue the legacy. The lullaby's magic was not just tied to the lighthouse, it was a part of Clara's very soul. She could feel it resonating within her, guiding her actions and decisions. The pendant had unlocked something deep within her, a knowledge she hadn't known she possessed. Clara knew now that she was not just the keeper of the lighthouse, she was part of a much larger story, one that stretched back through time. With the pendant in her hands and the lullaby echoing in her heart, Clara made a vow to protect the lighthouse and its secrets for as long as she lived. The journey had been long and difficult, but she had proven herself worthy of the responsibility. The storm had tested her, but she had stood strong. Now, it was time to embrace her role as the true keeper of the lighthouse. Clara stepped outside, feeling the weight of her duty settle upon her shoulders. The light of the lighthouse shone brighter than ever before, casting a long beam across the ocean. The lullaby continued to play, a reminder of the strength and power she now carried. With the pendant around her neck, Clara felt ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. She was no longer just a girl who had wandered into the lighthouse seeking answers, she was its protector, and the journey was just beginning. Clara stood in front of the lighthouse, her mind racing with the weight of her new responsibilities. The pendant, still warm in her hand, seemed to pulse with an energy that was both comforting and unsettling. As she gazed at the horizon, she felt a strange pull, as though someone or something was calling her. Without a second thought, Clara turned and made her way down the lighthouse steps, determined to uncover the source of the feeling. The soft sound of waves crashing against the shore filled the air, but beneath it, Clara heard something else, a faint whisper. It was almost imperceptible, like a voice carried on the wind. She stopped in her tracks, straining her ears. The whisper grew louder, clearer. It was calling her name. Clara followed the sound of the whisper, each step feeling as if it was leading her further into the mystery of the lighthouse. The voice seemed familiar, yet distant, as though it belonged to someone from another time. As she approached the edge of the rocky shore, the wind picked up, and the whispers turned into soft, melodic humming. The same lullaby that had haunted the lighthouse now seemed to be guiding her. She looked down at the sand beneath her feet, and there, half buried, was an old, weathered book. Clara knelt down and carefully brushed the sand away, revealing the worn cover. The book seemed ancient, its pages yellowed with age. The moment her fingers touched the cover, she felt a surge of energy and overwhelming sensation that she had seen this book before, in her dreams. Opening the book, Clara began to read aloud, the words flowing effortlessly from her lips. As she read, the whispers grew stronger, and the lullaby seemed to play in the background, guiding her deeper into the mystery. The book contained stories of the lighthouse's previous keepers, of the storm that had nearly destroyed it, and of the magical lullaby that had been passed down through generations. Each keeper had faced a trial, and each had been entrusted with the knowledge of the lullaby's power. Clara realized that this book was more than just a collection of stories. It was a guide, a map of sorts, leading her toward her own trial. She closed the book, her heart pounding in her chest. The lullaby had been calling her all along, and now it was up to her to fulfill her destiny. But what was the trial? What did she need to do next? As Clara pondered the answers, the air around her seemed to shift. The temperature dropped, and a strange chill ran down her spine. She turned around slowly, and there, standing at the edge of the shore, was a figure, a shadowy presence that seemed to flicker in and out of view. It was a woman, dressed in a flowing gown, her face hidden in the shadows. Clara's breath caught in her throat as the figure slowly approached. The woman's voice was soft but clear, carrying the weight of 1,000 years. "You have found the book," she said, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "But now, the real test begins." Clara felt a shiver run through her as the figure reached out and touched her hand, sending a jolt of energy through her entire body. The woman's presence faded, but Clara still felt the power of her touch. The world around her seemed to blur for a moment, and when the fog cleared, she found herself standing in the heart of the lighthouse, facing a new challenge. The walls of the lighthouse had transformed, the ancient stone now gleaming with an eerie light. A new door had appeared, one that had never been there before. Clara felt her heart race as she approached the door. The pendant around her neck grew warm, and the lullaby echoed in her ears, urging her forward. With a deep breath, Clara opened the door and stepped inside. The room was empty, save for a pedestal at the center. On the pedestal rested an ancient hourglass, its sand flowing upward, defying the laws of nature. Clara knew, without a doubt, that this was the trial. Clara stepped closer to the pedestal, her eyes fixed on the hourglass. The sand, now swirling in reverse, seemed to represent time itself, caught in an endless cycle. The air in the room was thick with magic, and Clara could feel the weight of her destiny pressing down on her shoulders. She had been chosen, and this hourglass was the key to unlocking the final piece of the puzzle. As Clara touched the hourglass, the room seemed to darken, and the whispers of the lullaby filled the space, louder than ever. She had to make a choice, one that would determine the future of the lighthouse and its magic. The trial had begun, and there was no turning back. As Clara's fingers touched the smooth surface of the hourglass, a cold shiver ran through her body. The sand continued to flow upward, each grain seeming to move with purpose, as if the hourglass itself had a life of its own. The room around her darkened further, the shadows twisting and curling like tendrils. She felt her pulse quicken, the weight of her decision pressing upon her. The lullaby echoed louder, filling the room with its haunting melody. It was as if the very air was thick with expectation. Clara had always believed that fate was something distant, something that could be avoided. But now, she understood it was right in front of her, and she was the one who had to decide. The hourglass was not just a relic, it was a symbol of time itself. Her choice would affect the future of the lighthouse, the lullaby, and everything it stood for. Could she truly change the past, or would she allow history to repeat itself? Suddenly, a voice broke through the silence, its tone both familiar and chilling. "You stand at the crossroads," Clara, the voice said, echoing in the cavernous room. It was the same voice she had heard on the shore, the mysterious woman who had appeared and vanished like a shadow. This time, the voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, surrounding Clara, enveloping her in its presence. Clara's breath caught in her throat as she tried to steady herself. "What must I do?" she asked, her voice trembling. The room seemed to pulse with the answer, as if the very walls of the lighthouse were alive, waiting for her next move. The woman's voice returned, softer now, as though trying to soothe Clara's growing anxiety. "Only you can decide the fate of the lighthouse. The hourglass holds the power of your choice." Clara stepped back from the pedestal, her mind racing. The weight of the decision was overwhelming, and yet she knew that time was running out. The sand in the hourglass had stopped flowing, but the silence that filled the room felt heavy, almost suffocating. The lullaby continued to play softly in the background, its gentle melody contrasting with the tension Clara felt inside. She closed her eyes for a moment, remembering everything that had led her to this point: the whispers, the book, the pendant. All the pieces of the puzzle were before her, but the answer remained elusive. She had never asked for this responsibility, but now it was hers. And with it came a choice that would shape the future. Would she accept the power of the lighthouse, or would she let it fade away into the shadows? As Clara stood there, the weight of the hourglass in her hands, a sudden clarity washed over her. The whispers of the lullaby grew softer, like a mother's lullaby soothing a child to sleep. It wasn't just a song, it was a guide, a reminder that Clara was not alone. The lighthouse had chosen her for a reason, and this trial was part of her journey. The voice of the woman returned, but this time it was calm and reassuring. "You were meant to carry the legacy," the voice said. "Your choice will protect the lighthouse and ensure its light shines for generations to come. But remember, there is no turning back once the choice is made." Clara's heart skipped a beat. There was no turning back, but that was okay. She had made up her mind. With newfound determination, Clara turned the hourglass over. The sand began to fall, each grain cascading down like the ticking of a clock. The shadows around her seemed to recede, the room growing lighter, as if the very act of making her choice had caused the dark clouds to part. The lullaby played louder now, not in a haunting way, but in a triumphant, celebratory tone. Clara had made her decision. She wasn't going to run from her destiny. The lighthouse, the lullaby, the magic, it was all part of something bigger than her. Something that had been waiting for centuries to be fulfilled. She raised her head high, knowing that whatever happened next, she was ready. The first step had been taken. As the last grain of sand fell through the hourglass, the lighthouse's light flared brightly, casting a warm, golden glow across the horizon. The winds, which had once howled with fury, now calmed, and the sea settled into a tranquil rhythm. Clara stood at the heart of the lighthouse, the pendant around her neck glowing softly, its warmth spreading through her like a wave of comfort. The air was still, but Clara could feel the change within her. The lullaby had stopped, its final notes ringing in her ears. But it wasn't gone, no, it was within her now, a part of her, guiding her every step. The lighthouse had awakened, its magic reborn with Clara as its new keeper. The storm was over, but this was only the beginning. Clara stood at the top of the lighthouse, her eyes gazing out at the vast sea that stretched endlessly before her. The light that now filled the tower was brighter than she had ever imagined, a beacon of hope in the midst of the darkness. But with this light came responsibility. The lullaby that had once haunted her dreams now felt like a familiar companion, echoing in the back of her mind. It was no longer a mystery, it was part of her, guiding her through every step. She understood now that the lighthouse was not just a place, it was a living, breathing entity. The light was a symbol of protection, but it also held a deep power, one that Clara would need to learn to wield. She wasn't just the keeper of the lighthouse, she was its protector, its link to the past, and its guardian for the future. The weight of this realization settled on her shoulders, but instead of fear, she felt a sense of peace. As Clara made her way down the spiral staircase, she noticed something unusual. The lighthouse, which had always seemed so quiet, now felt different. There was a presence, not threatening, but watching. Clara paused, her hand on the railing, sensing a shift in the air. It wasn't the wind, it was something else, something far older. She looked around but saw nothing, only the faint glow of the lighthouse light casting long shadows along the walls. The presence wasn't new, it had always been there. The lullaby she had heard was a call, not just to her, but to those who had watched over the lighthouse for centuries. Clara wasn't alone in this task. There were other silent, unseen figures who had been waiting for her to awaken the light. They weren't ghosts or spirits. They were guardians, bound to the lighthouse and its power, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. As Clara explored deeper into the lighthouse, she discovered something unexpected, a hidden passage. It was tucked away behind an old, weathered door that seemed to have been forgotten by time. The passage was narrow, winding through the stone walls like a secret path, leading her down into the depths of the lighthouse. Clara hesitated for a moment, but then felt an irresistible pull to continue. She ventured into the passage, her footsteps echoing in the stillness. The walls were covered in strange markings, symbols she didn't recognize. Some were ancient, others newer, but all seemed to tell a story of the lighthouse, of its magic, and of those who had come before her. As she moved deeper into the passage, the air grew colder, and the lullaby seemed to hum faintly in the background, It was as if the lighthouse itself was guiding her, urging her forward. At the end of the passage, Clara found herself in a large, circular room. The walls were adorned with old paintings and carvings, all depicting the lighthouse through the ages. In the center of the room was a stone pedestal, and upon it an ancient book lay open, its pages yellowed with age. The moment Clara stepped into the room, she felt a surge of energy, as if the room had been waiting for her arrival. The book seemed to beckon her, its pages fluttering in the windless air. Clara approached it slowly, her hands trembling slightly as she reached out to touch the pages. As her fingers brushed the book, a rush of images flooded her mind, visions of past keepers, of storms and calm seas, of the lullaby that had been sung for generations. She could feel the weight of the knowledge within the book, and for the first time Clara realized what she had truly inherited, not just the lighthouse, but its entire history. Clara flipped through the pages, her heart pounding in her chest as she read. The truth about the lighthouse was more complex than she had imagined. It wasn't just a source of light, it was a bridge between worlds. The lullaby, the one that had haunted her dreams, was a key one that allowed the lighthouse to protect not just the living, but the souls who had been lost at sea. The lighthouse was a guardian of the forgotten, and Clara had now become its link to both the past and the future. The realization hit her like a wave. She wasn't just protecting the living from storms, she was also protecting the souls of those lost to the sea, ensuring they never drifted into the darkness. The lullaby was their song, their cry for help, and now it was her responsibility to carry it on. As Clara closed the book, the room seemed to come alive. The walls hummed with energy, and the air felt charged, like a storm was about to break. Suddenly, a light appeared in the corner of the room, soft at first, then growing brighter. The guardians, those who had waited for her, had come. They were not spirits, but figures made of light, their forms shifting and changing like shadows in the glow. They stood silently, watching Clara, their eyes filled with ancient wisdom. One of the guardians stepped forward, her face soft and kind. "You are ready," she said, her voice a soothing melody. "The lighthouse is yours now, and the lullaby will guide you. But remember, Clara, this is only the beginning. There are forces beyond the lighthouse that seek to undo what has been protected for centuries." Clara nodded, her resolve strengthening. She knew that her journey was far from over, but for the first time she felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. That evening, as Clara stood at the top of the lighthouse once more, she watched the waves crash against the rocks below. The sun had set, and the sky was filled with stars, their light shimmering over the sea. The lighthouse's beam cut through the darkness, its light now steady and sure. Clara had never felt more connected to the world around her. The lullaby still played softly in the background, but it no longer felt like a warning. It was a song of hope, a reminder that she was never truly alone. Tonight would be her first night as the true keeper of the lighthouse. She wasn't just protecting the living or the lost souls anymore, she was the keeper of a legacy that had been passed down through generations. And with that legacy came a purpose to keep the light burning, to protect the sea, and to ensure that the lullaby would continue to guide those who needed it most. As Clara settled into her new role, she began to notice something strange. The guardians were always near, always watching, but they remained out of sight. She felt their presence, a comforting weight on her shoulders, but they never interfered. They were her silent protectors, ensuring that she remained true to the lighthouse's legacy. The lighthouse was alive, not just with magic, but with history. It held the memories of all those who had come before her, and now it held hers as well. The lullaby had changed. It was no longer a song of mystery, but one of strength, guiding her through the dark nights. Clara knew that the journey ahead would be filled with challenges, but she was ready. With the guardians by her side and the lighthouse's light to guide her, she knew that she was where she was meant to be. The nights had grown colder, and Clara could feel the changes in the air. As the waves crashed against the cliffs, she stood at the edge of the lighthouse, looking out into the black expanse. The lullaby whispered in the wind, its melody both comforting and eerie. It seemed to grow louder each night, as if the lighthouse itself was trying to tell her something. Her role as keeper was clear now, but the mystery of the lullaby still lingered in her mind, like a secret she was meant to uncover. Tonight felt different. The guardians who had been silent watchers for so long seemed to stir, their forms flickering in the shadows, as if something was about to change. Clara felt a deep sense of unease, but she couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was coming, she was ready for it. The light of the lighthouse shone brightly, steady and constant, but Clara could feel a strange pull within her, urging her to listen more closely to the lullaby. Suddenly, the sound of the waves grew louder, almost deafening. Clara turned sharply, her heart racing as she heard something else, a voice, faint and distant, calling out from the sea. It was a voice she had never heard before, but it felt familiar. The lullaby seemed to respond to the voice, its notes bending and shifting, as if the two were connected. Clara stepped closer to the edge, her eyes scanning the darkness below. "Help me," the voice called again, clearer now, almost desperate. Clara's breath caught in her throat. It was a cry for help, but from where? The sea was vast and treacherous, and no one could survive out there. But the voice, it was real. It wasn't a ghost or a memory. It was something new, something that had emerged from the depths of the sea. Clara's hands trembled as she reached for the light, knowing she had to respond, but not sure how. Clara didn't know what to do. The voice had called to her, but it felt like something ancient, something from the past had awakened. She thought of the book she had found deep within the lighthouse, the one that held the stories of past keepers and the dark secrets of the lighthouse's power. Clara rushed back to the stone pedestal, where the book lay waiting. As she flipped through the pages, the sound of the voice grew louder, urging her on. The pages seemed to come alive, revealing more than they had before. She found a chapter she hadn't noticed earlier, one that spoke of the sea's voice, a call that only the keeper of the lighthouse could hear. The voice was not of the living, but of the lost souls who wandered the deep, waiting to be freed. Clara realized that the lullaby had always been part of the lighthouse's magic. It wasn't just a song to protect, it was a song to guide the lost souls home. The truth dawned on her. She wasn't just protecting the lighthouse from the darkness, she was also saving the lost from the sea. Clara stood frozen in the chamber, the book in her hands, the voice from the sea still calling out. She could feel the weight of her decision pressing on her chest. The guardians had never spoken of this, of the responsibility to free the lost souls. The lighthouse had always been a protector, but now it seemed that Clara had to become a guide, a bridge between the world of the living and the lost. She could hear the guardians' whispers in the back of her mind. They were urging her to make the right choice, to listen to the voice that called out from the sea. Clara closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. The lighthouse was hers now, and the lullaby was part of her. But what if answering the call meant something more? What if she could finally bring peace to those who had been lost at sea? It was a choice only she could make, and in that moment, Clara knew what she had to do. With newfound resolve, Clara left the chamber and made her way back to the top of the lighthouse. The wind had picked up, and the waves seemed to crash with greater intensity against the rocks below. The lighthouse light shone brighter than ever, casting a warm, steady glow across the dark waters. Clara could hear the voice again, clearer now, almost pleading. She stepped to the edge of the lighthouse and looked down at the churning sea. She could feel the pull, the magnetic force drawing her toward the water. The lullaby swelled within her, urging her to listen, to understand. With a deep breath, Clara reached out, letting the lullaby guide her. The guardians watched in silence, their eyes filled with understanding. They knew this was her moment, the moment she would either answer the call or let it slip away. The sea whispered once more, and this time Clara listened. The truth was clear: she was the keeper, not just of the lighthouse, but of the souls lost to the sea. Clara stepped forward, her body shaking with the intensity of the moment. The light of the lighthouse flickered, responding to her movement, as if the entire structure was alive with energy. The voice from the sea grew louder, more urgent, but now Clara understood. It wasn't a cry for help, it was a cry for release. The souls of those lost at sea were calling out for freedom, for the chance to move on. With a final, deep breath, Clara began to sing the lullaby. Her voice joined with the song of the lighthouse, blending with the magic that had always been there. The sea seemed to calm, the waves smoothing out as if they had heard her. The voices grew quiet, fading into the night. And for the first time, Clara felt a peace she had never known. The lost souls had been set free, and the lighthouse had fulfilled its purpose. As the night settled, Clara knew that her journey had only just begun. The lighthouse would continue to guide, but now it would be a beacon of peace, not just for the living, but for the lost as well. The lighthouse stood still, as if nothing had happened, yet Clara could feel the shift in the air. The once relentless crashing of the waves had softened, their rhythmic ebb and flow now peaceful and serene. The sea, which had always been a source of mystery and danger, seemed to reflect the calm in Clara's heart. She had answered the call, set the lost souls free. And in return, the lighthouse had given her a gift, a sense of purpose she had never known before. For the first time, Clara felt connected to the lighthouse in a way she hadn't before. She could feel the ancient stone beneath her feet, the warmth of the light above her, and the song of the sea in the distance. It was as if the lullaby had become a part of her, its melody now etched into her soul. The guardians, still lingering in the shadows, watched over her with a sense of approval, their silent presence offering reassurance. Clara knew that the lighthouse's true purpose had been revealed to her, and it was a duty she would carry for as long as she lived. As Clara stood in the tower, deep in her thoughts, the familiar sound of the lullaby echoed once more. At first she thought it was just the wind, but the melody was unmistakable, as if the lighthouse itself was singing again. This time, however, it wasn't a warning or a call. It was a song of celebration. The spirits of the lost souls had found their peace, and the lighthouse was singing in their honor. Clara smiled softly, knowing that she had done something extraordinary, something that would be remembered for generations. The song continued, rising and falling like the waves beneath her, comforting and soothing. It seemed to grow brighter, as though the lighthouse was alive with energy. Clara's heart swelled with pride, and she knew, in that moment, that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The lullaby would forever be part of the lighthouse's legacy, a melody that would continue to guide those who needed it most. The weeks that followed were peaceful, but Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. The lullaby had stopped haunting her dreams, and the restless energy of the lighthouse had quieted. She wondered if she had truly fulfilled her role, or if there was more to the lighthouse's secrets than she had discovered. One evening, as Clara sat by the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon, a strange thought crossed her mind. What if the lullaby wasn't just for the lost souls? What if it was meant to guide her too? Clara's thoughts raced as she pondered this new question. The lighthouse had shown her the way to free the souls, but perhaps there was more to her connection with the place. Maybe, just maybe, the lighthouse was guiding her toward something she hadn't yet understood. The light was no longer just a beacon for the sea, it was a guiding force for her own life, helping her find the path she was meant to walk. That night, Clara was awoken by a soft knock on the door. It was a rare occurrence. Visitors were few and far between at the lighthouse, especially at this hour. She hurried downstairs, her heart pounding with curiosity. When she opened the door, she was surprised to see a familiar face, a man she had seen once before in the village. His eyes were dark, and his face was weary. He introduced himself as Ethan, a traveler who had heard the stories of the haunted lighthouse. Ethan explained that he had come to seek Clara's help. He had been troubled by dreams of the sea, dreams of a voice calling him in the night. He believed that the lighthouse held the key to understanding these dreams, and he had come to ask for guidance. Clara was taken aback, but she knew, deep down, that this was no coincidence. The lullaby had drawn him here, just as it had drawn her. Clara invited him in, ready to help him uncover the truth behind his dreams. Ethan stayed at the lighthouse for several days, and as they spent time together, Clara learned more about his dreams. He spoke of a haunting voice, one that echoed in the waves and called out to him in his sleep. It sounded familiar, but he could never quite remember the words. Clara realized that the voice was similar to the lullaby she had heard all those months ago, the same voice that had called out to her from the sea. As the days passed, Ethan began to experience strange visions of a time long past, of ships lost in the storm and souls stranded in the deep. Clara knew that the lullaby had a greater power than she had ever realized. It was more than just a song, it was a key, a force that could unlock the past and guide those who were lost, both in the physical world and the spiritual one. She and Ethan began to study the lullaby together, trying to decipher its meaning, hoping to uncover the truth about its origins and its connection to the lighthouse. One stormy night, as they sat by the fire, the lullaby seemed to rise from the depths of the sea once more. But this time, Clara and Ethan heard something different, a new verse, one they hadn't heard before. It was soft and haunting, but it carried with it a message. The lullaby spoke of a forgotten shipwreck, of a tragic event that had taken place long ago. Clara's heart raced as she listened, realizing that this was the final piece of the puzzle. The lighthouse had always been more than just a keeper of souls, it was a guardian of history, protecting the secrets of the past. The lullaby's new verse told the story of the lost ship, the ship that had brought the souls to the lighthouse in the first place. It had been caught in a terrible storm, and the souls had never been able to rest. But now, with the lullaby's final song, Clara and Ethan could put the past to rest. The spirits of the shipwrecked souls would finally be free. And as the storm outside raged on, Clara knew that the lighthouse's true purpose had been fulfilled, and that she had helped guide the lost home, just as she was always meant to do. The storm outside had calmed, but the echoes of the lullaby lingered in the air, faint yet powerful. Clara stood by the lighthouse window, watching as the clouds parted and the first rays of sunlight broke through. It was as though the entire world had been cleansed by the storm, and the lighthouse had played its part in this purification. She could feel the change deep within herself and the lighthouse. The spirits of the lost souls had been freed, and the lullaby was no longer a call for help. It had become a celebration, a peaceful farewell. As the sun rose higher in the sky, Clara felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The lighthouse had served its purpose, and the journey that had begun with a haunting song had now come to an end. She smiled softly, knowing that the lullaby would always remain with her. It had been a part of her, guiding her through the darkest times and helping her discover her true strength. And now it was time to let go, to embrace the light that had been revealed to her. With the storm finally over, Clara and Ethan stood at the foot of the lighthouse, gazing out at the sea. The water was calm, and the winds had settled into a gentle breeze. The world felt different now, lighter, as if the burden of the past had been lifted. Clara knew that her time at the lighthouse had come to an end, but she also understood that her journey wasn't over. The lullaby had taught her so much about the strength within herself, and now she was ready to face whatever came next. Ethan, too, had changed. The dreams that had once tormented him had faded, replaced by a sense of clarity and purpose. He turned to Clara and thanked her for her guidance, knowing that he could never have uncovered the truth without her. Clara simply smiled, knowing that their paths had crossed for a reason. The lullaby had brought them together, and now they would both move forward stronger, wiser, and free from the shadows of the past. Days turned into weeks, and life at the lighthouse returned to its quiet rhythm. Clara had become a part of the lighthouse's legacy, its silent guardian, ensuring that the secrets it held would never be forgotten. She knew that the lullaby would continue to echo through the waves, a reminder of the past and the souls that had once sought refuge there. The lighthouse would remain, standing tall against the tides of time, its light guiding those in need. One evening, as Clara stood at the top of the lighthouse, she gazed out at the horizon, the last remnants of the setting sun casting a golden glow on the sea. She couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the journey she had undertaken. The lighthouse had given her purpose, had shown her the power of compassion and the importance of letting go. It had taught her that even in the darkest of times, there was always light to be found. And now the light would never fade. Months passed, and Clara continued to care for the lighthouse, but she never forgot the lullaby. It had become a part of her, a melody woven into the fabric of her life. One night, as she sat by the fire, the familiar sound of the lullaby began to play once more. It wasn't loud or overpowering, it was soft and gentle, like a whisper on the wind. Clara listened closely, recognizing the same soothing melody that had guided her on her journey. But this time, there was a difference. The lullaby didn't carry the weight of sorrow or longing. Instead, it was filled with hope, a promise that the lighthouse would continue to watch over the world, protecting and guiding those who needed it most. Clara smiled, knowing that the lullaby would never truly leave her. It had become a part of her soul, and as long as she was there, the light of the lighthouse would shine brightly for all to see. Clara had learned many lessons during her time at the lighthouse, but perhaps the most important one was the power of letting go. The lullaby had started as a haunting reminder of loss and regret, but through her journey, it had transformed into a symbol of peace and healing. Clara had helped guide the spirits of the past to their rest, but in doing so, she had also found her own peace. She no longer felt burdened by the weight of the past. As the sun set on another quiet evening, Clara stood at the lighthouse's door, looking out at the world she had come to love. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the faintest echo of the lullaby. It was a reminder that, no matter where life took her, the lighthouse would always be there, a beacon of light in the darkness. And for Clara, that was all she needed to know. And so, the story of the haunted lighthouse came to a close, but its legacy lived on. Clara's time at the lighthouse had come to an end, but the lullaby would forever echo in the hearts of those who had listened to its call. The light of the lighthouse continued to shine, guiding lost souls and giving them a place to rest. And Clara, with her heart full of gratitude and peace, stepped away from the lighthouse, ready to begin a new chapter in her life. The lullaby had done its work, and it was time for her to carry its lessons into the world. As she walked away, the lighthouse stood tall behind her, its light flickering in the distance, a silent guardian, forever watching over the sea. The story of the haunted lighthouse was over, but the echoes of its lullaby would never fade. And so, the world continued to turn, guided by the light, and the lullaby that would never stop singing. It had been years since Clara left the lighthouse, yet the lullaby never truly left her. Each time she closed her eyes, she could still hear its soft, haunting melody in the back of her mind, like a lullaby from another time. Sometimes, while walking along the beach near the lighthouse, she'd catch the faintest hint of the song carried by the wind, a reminder of the past that never truly faded. She thought that maybe the lullaby was a gift, a melody that would follow her throughout her life. It was a part of her now, woven into her soul, a reminder of the strength she had gained and the peace she had found. One evening, as Clara sat on the beach watching the waves crash gently against the shore, she heard it again, the lullaby. But this time, it was clearer. She stood up, her heart racing, as she felt a strange pull towards the lighthouse. Was it calling her back? Or was it merely the echoes of memories long past? Clara hesitated for only a moment before she decided to walk towards the lighthouse, her steps sure and steady as she made her way across the familiar path that led to the lighthouse she once called home. As Clara approached the lighthouse, she felt a strange warmth wash over her. The building stood just as it had all those years ago, its light still shining brightly in the distance, guiding travelers on their journeys. But there was something different now, something that made her feel like she was walking into a new chapter of her life. The lighthouse had always been a place of mystery and secrets, but now it felt like a place of peace, a sanctuary where the past and present merged into one. Clara reached the door and pushed it open. It creaked with a familiar sound, as though it recognized her. Stepping inside, she felt the air shift around her. The walls seemed to breathe with the same life they had when she first arrived, and she could almost hear the whispers of the past. The lullaby echoed softly in the background, as if welcoming her back. She smiled to herself, knowing that this was the place she was always meant to return to. The journey had been long, but it had led her back to where she belonged. The lighthouse felt alive once more, as though it had been waiting for Clara's return. She wandered through the rooms, touching the familiar objects that had once been a part of her daily life. Each item seemed to tell its own story. a story of the past and the souls that had come to find solace in the lighthouse's light. As she explored, Clara found herself drawn to the top of the lighthouse once more. She ascended the spiral staircase, each step bringing her closer to the light that had guided so many. At the top, Clara gazed out at the vast ocean, the waves crashing against the shore in a rhythmic dance. The wind tugged at her hair, and she felt a sense of connection to everything around her: the sea, the sky, the lighthouse. She was part of it all. And in that moment, she knew that she was the keeper of the light now, the one who would continue to protect the secrets of the lighthouse and guide those who sought its solace. The lullaby would never truly stop. It would always be there, a song that continued to echo through time. That night, as Clara stood by the lighthouse window, she heard the wind picking up again. It was as if the sea itself was speaking to her, whispering secrets that only the lighthouse could understand. She listened closely, the sound of the wind mingling with the faint melody of the lullaby. It was softer now, more peaceful, as if the spirits of the past had finally found their rest. The lullaby had come full circle. It had started as a cry for help, a song of sorrow, but it had evolved into something more beautiful, more hopeful. Clara closed her eyes, letting the wind carry the lullaby through the open window. She could feel the spirits of the lighthouse around her, their presence no longer a haunting, but a gentle, loving embrace. They were no longer lost or trapped. They had found peace, and in doing so, they had given Clara the peace she had always searched for. The wind whispered one last time, and Clara smiled, knowing that her work here was complete. The lighthouse would continue to shine, its light forever guiding the way. As the days passed, Clara settled back into the rhythm of life at the lighthouse. She had come to understand that the lullaby wasn't just a song, it was a promise that the lighthouse would always be there, guarding those who needed its light. The spirits had left, but their legacy remained in the lighthouse, in the stories it held, and in the peace it offered. Clara took up the mantle of the lighthouse keeper with pride, knowing that she was fulfilling the promise that had been made long ago. One evening, as Clara stood by the window, watching the sunset over the horizon, she heard the lullaby once more. This time, it was not carried by the wind or the waves, but came from within the lighthouse itself. The song was gentle, filled with warmth and love. Clara closed her eyes, letting the melody wash over her. She knew that the lighthouse would always be there, and that the lullaby would never truly end. It would live on, in the hearts of all those who had been touched by its song. As the years passed, the lighthouse remained a beacon of hope for all who sought its light. Clara continued to care for the lighthouse, never forgetting the lullaby that had changed her life. She would often find herself standing at the top of the lighthouse, gazing out at the sea, listening to the song that now felt like her own. The lighthouse had become her home, her sanctuary, and she had become its eternal keeper. And so, the story of the haunted lighthouse came to an end, but its light never faltered. It continued to shine brightly, guiding those who needed it most, just as it had guided Clara all those years ago. The lullaby, once a haunting melody, had become a song of peace, echoing through the winds and waves. It was a song that would never fade, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there is always light to guide the way. One stormy evening, as Clara sat in the lighthouse, a strange sensation overtook her. The wind howled louder than ever before, and the waves crashed violently against the rocks below. It was as if the ocean itself was restless, demanding attention. The lullaby, once soft and comforting, now carried a new edge to its melody, a whisper of something forgotten. Clara shivered slightly, but she knew that it was only the spirit of the lighthouse, calling her to remember the deeper, darker history of the place. As the storm raged outside, Clara found herself drawn to the old journal that she had discovered years ago. It had belonged to the lighthouse keeper before her, and it contained tales of strange happening stories that were more than just folklore. She had never fully understood the significance of the journal until now. As she flipped through the pages, she found a passage that stood out. The lullaby is not just a song, it is the key to unlocking the lighthouse's true purpose. Clara felt her pulse quicken. What had she missed all these years? The melody was more than just a lullaby. It was a part of something far greater. Clara spent the next few nights studying the journal, piecing together the scattered clues. She discovered that the lullaby was a ritual, one that had been sung by each keeper of the lighthouse. It was said that the song had the power to unlock hidden doors within the lighthouse, doors that had been sealed for centuries. These doors led to chambers where the spirits of past keepers had once lived, and perhaps where the secret of the lighthouse's true power lay. One night, as Clara sang the lullaby softly to herself, she felt a shift in the air. The temperature dropped, and the lighthouse seemed to groan with life, as if it was waking up. The lullaby resonated through the walls, and suddenly, the floor beneath her feet began to shift. Clara gasped as a hidden trapdoor slowly creaked open in the center of the room. She knew this was no accident. The song had opened the door. There was no turning back now. Clara carefully descended into the hidden chamber below the lighthouse. The air was thick with dust, and the walls were covered in strange markings that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. She could hear the soft echoes of the lullaby, its haunting melody reverberating through the underground passage. As Clara walked further into the chamber, she came upon a stone pedestal at the center of the room. On it lay an old, ornate key, glowing with an ethereal light. The key was unlike anything she had ever seen before. It was carved from a material that shimmered like the sea at night, and its intricate design seemed to tell a story of its own. Clara reached out and took the key in her hand, feeling an immediate connection to it. She knew, without a doubt, that this key was the final piece of the puzzle. It was the key to unlocking the full potential of the lighthouse and the lullaby. With the key in hand, Clara made her way back to the lighthouse. The storm had passed, and the night was quiet, as if the lighthouse itself was waiting for her. She stood in front of the old door that had always been locked, the door that had never been opened by any keeper before her. As she inserted the key into the lock, the door clicked open with a soft, satisfying sound. Clara stepped inside, unsure of what she would find. The room was unlike any she had ever seen before. It was filled with ancient artifacts and books, relics from the past. But at the far end of the room was something even more astonishing, a large, glowing crystal embedded in the wall. The crystal pulsed with a gentle light, and Clara knew instantly that it was the heart of the lighthouse. It was the source of its power, the reason the lighthouse had always stood strong, guiding sailors safely through the storm. As Clara approached the crystal, the lullaby began to play once again, louder than ever before. The melody filled the room, and Clara felt a deep, overwhelming sense of peace. The song was not just a lullaby. It was the heartbeat of the lighthouse, a symbol of its power and purpose. Clara reached out and touched the crystal, feeling its energy surge through her. The light from the crystal seemed to flow into her, filling her with warmth and strength. She understood now. The lighthouse wasn't just a guide for sailors, it was a sanctuary for lost souls, a place where they could find peace. The lullaby had always been the key to unlocking this sanctuary, to connecting the living with the spirits of the past. Clara was no longer just the keeper of the lighthouse, she had become its protector, the one who would ensure that the lighthouse's light would never go out. As the song played, Clara made a vow to guard the lighthouse and its secrets forever. From that day forward, Clara continued her role as the keeper of the lighthouse, but now she was more than just a caretaker. She was the guardian of the light, the one who would ensure that the lullaby would continue to guide and protect those in need. The lullaby echoed through the lighthouse, a song of hope, peace, and protection. Years passed, but Clara remained at the lighthouse, her connection to the light never wavering. The lullaby played every night, a constant reminder of the power of the lighthouse and the spirits who had once called it home. And as long as the song continued to play, Clara knew that the lighthouse would remain a beacon of hope for all those who needed its light. Clara sat by the lighthouse window, watching as dark clouds began to gather over the ocean once more. The winds had picked up, and the waves churned angrily against the rocks below. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something she had not yet prepared for. The lullaby had become a constant presence in her life, but tonight its melody sounded different, darker, more urgent. Clara felt a shiver run down her spine. The lighthouse was calling her, but not in the way it had before. As the storm grew closer, Clara found herself drawn to the crystal once more. The light it emitted had dimmed slightly, as if it too sensed the coming danger. The lullaby played louder, almost as if it was warning her. She hesitated for a moment, then made her way down to the chamber beneath the lighthouse. The key she had once used to open the door was still in her hand, but this time she wasn't sure what it would unlock. Clara stepped into the underground chamber, but something was different. The air was thick with an unfamiliar energy, and the crystal pulsed with a strange, erratic rhythm. As Clara approached the pedestal, she heard a voice, a soft whisper that seemed to come from nowhere. The voice was faint at first, but it grew louder with each step she took. The voice called her name. Clara turned around quickly, her heart racing, but no one was there. She felt a cold breeze brush past her, and then a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a man, cloaked in dark robes, his face hidden by a hood. Clara took a step back, instinctively clutching the key in her hand. The man's presence was unsettling, but there was something familiar about him. His voice, though soft, carried a sense of authority that Clara couldn't ignore. The man spoke, his voice a low whisper that seemed to resonate through the very walls of the lighthouse. "You are the new keeper," he said. "But you have yet to unlock the true power of this place." Clara stared at him, confused. She had always believed she understood the lighthouse, its purpose, and its song. But this man's presence suggested there was much more hidden beneath the surface. "You have been chosen," Clara, the man continued, stepping closer. "But you must understand the price of guarding this place. The lighthouse holds a power that cannot be contained forever. You are not just protecting the spirits of the past, you are keeping something far more dangerous at bay." Clara's mind raced as she processed his words. What was he talking about? What did he mean by the price of guarding the lighthouse? The man gestured toward the crystal, which now glowed with an intense, almost painful light. "The seal is breaking," he said, his voice filled with urgency. The lullaby was never meant to keep the power hidden forever. It was meant to protect the world from it. But you, Clara, have awakened it. Clara's eyes widened as she realized the full extent of what he was saying. The lullaby, the crystal, the lighthouse, everything had been a facade, a safeguard to protect the world from something far worse. The storm outside raged even harder, and Clara could feel the ground beneath her feet begin to tremble. The man's face remained hidden, but his voice was filled with sadness. "The time has come for the final choice," he whispered. "You must either seal it away once more or release it. But know this, once you make your choice, there is no turning back." Clara stood frozen, her mind swirling with uncertainty. The storm outside howled as if it too was caught in the decision that she had to make. The crystal pulsed brightly, almost beckoning her to approach it. Her hand shook as she held the key, unsure whether to insert it once again or to leave the seal broken. She knew the lighthouse had always been a place of protection, but now she saw it as a prison that had kept something dark and dangerous hidden for centuries. The man stepped back, his eyes glimmering in the dim light. "Only you can decide," he said softly. "But remember, every choice has consequences. The lullaby will either protect or destroy. The question is, do you trust the song, or will you let the storm decide?" Clara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She had no choice but to make it now. With a final glance at the mysterious figure, Clara stepped forward and placed the key into the crystal. The moment the key touched the stone, the lighthouse shook violently. The storm outside reached its peak, and Clara felt as though the very earth itself was splitting apart. But then, there was silence. The lullaby stopped. Clara opened her eyes to see the crystal shattering into pieces, each shard glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light. The man was gone and the storm had passed. But the lighthouse was different. The air was thick with energy, and Clara could feel the change deep within her soul. She had made her choice, and the consequences were unknown. The lullaby would no longer protect the lighthouse. It would now unleash its true power, and Clara, as the keeper, would have to face whatever came next. Clara stood motionless, staring at the remnants of the shattered crystal. The silence around her was deafening, and the weight of what she had just done pressed down on her like a storm cloud. The storm had stopped, but the air was thick with an ominous tension that Clara couldn't ignore. She could feel the power now flowing through the lighthouse, a force that seemed both ancient and eternal. As she took a step back, she noticed something moving in the shadows. The faint whispers from before began to rise again, growing louder and more insistent. Clara turned sharply, her heart racing. Was it the lullaby returning? Or was it something else? She followed the sound of the whispers down the dark hallways of the lighthouse, feeling an inexplicable pull drawing her forward. As she approached the entrance to the main tower, a cold gust of wind swept through, and the door creaked open, revealing a figure she recognized all too well. The figure in the doorway was not the man from before. This one was different, more familiar, yet strangely distorted. Clara's breath caught in her throat as she realized who it was. It was her. Or at least, someone who looked exactly like her, standing in the doorway with an eerie, knowing smile. The doppelganger stepped forward, her eyes glowing with a faint, unnatural light. "You've done it, Clara," she said, her voice echoing through the empty lighthouse. "The seal is broken, and the true power is yours to command. But be warned, you are not the first to face this choice." Clara's heart pounded in her chest as the doppelganger continued. The lighthouse has claimed many keepers over the centuries, and each time the power was either sealed or unleashed, but never without consequence. The figure reached out, her hand cold and lifeless, as if made from the very shadows of the lighthouse. You may not fully understand yet, but this place, this lighthouse, is not just a protector. It is a prison for something far worse than you can imagine. The doppelganger's voice grew darker, more urgent. I am a part of its past, a memory of all the souls who have tried and failed to control the power within. We are the guardians, trapped in this cycle, forever bound to the light that once guided us. Clara's mind raced as she tried to process the doppelganger's words. She had always thought of the lighthouse as a place of safety, a refuge from the darkness that lurked outside. But now it seemed that the truth was much more complicated. Was she really ready to handle the power she had just unlocked? Was she strong enough to resist the pull of the lighthouse's dark past? The doppelganger raised her hand, and Clara felt a sudden, intense surge of energy coursing through her veins. The lighthouse seemed to come alive, its walls pulsating with an otherworldly rhythm. "This power is yours, Clara," the figure whispered, "but at a price. The price of the keeper is eternal. You will never leave this place. You will become one with the lighthouse, trapped in its endless cycle of light and darkness." Clara stumbled backward, her mind reeling. She had thought she was making the right choice by unlocking the power, but now she was unsure. Could she truly take on this burden? The lighthouse was no longer a place of safety, it was a prison for anyone who dared to control its power. But Clara had no choice now. She had broken the seal, and with it, had unlocked the very force that kept the lighthouse's secrets hidden. There was no turning back. As Clara stood there, struggling with the weight of her decision, the lullaby began to play again. This time, it was louder, more haunting, as though the very walls of the lighthouse were singing the song. The melody was different now, darker and more ominous. Clara could feel the pull of the music, drawing her in. It was no longer a comforting song, it was a call, one that seemed to demand her attention, to control her very soul. She closed her eyes, trying to resist, but the lullaby had already taken hold. Her hands trembled as she reached for the crystal, the key still tightly gripped in her palm. The melody wrapped around her, whispering secrets of the past, of the many keepers who had come before her, all lost to the same fate. It was clear now the lighthouse was alive, and it had been waiting for Clara to make her choice. The energy within the lighthouse reached a fever pitch, and Clara felt her body grow weaker with each passing second. The lullaby swirled around her, its melody becoming a frantic, desperate cry. She could feel the pull of the lighthouse, its power wrapping around her like chains, pulling her deeper into its dark embrace. In the distance, she heard the faint sound of the ocean waves crashing against the rocks, as if the sea itself was mourning the decision she had made. The lighthouse had claimed another keeper. Clara's vision blurred, and she collapsed to her knees, her hand still clutching the key. The crystal began to glow once more, and the lullaby reached its crescendo, filling the air with its haunting refrain. Clara closed her eyes, knowing that she had sealed her fate. She was now one with the lighthouse, bound forever to the secrets it held. Clara felt a strange warmth spreading through her body, but it wasn't a comforting warmth. It was the light from within the lighthouse, wrapping around her like an invisible force. It was as though the very lighthouse had claimed her soul, and now she was no longer just Clara. She was part of its eternal pulse. The whispers of past keepers filled her mind, their voices blending with the lullaby that seemed to come from the lighthouse itself. As she stood up, trembling, Clara realized something terrifying. The lighthouse wasn't just a place, it was a living entity. It breathed, it spoke, and now it had taken her in. She looked around, and everything felt different. The walls, once solid and cold, now seemed to hum with life. The room grew darker, shadows twisting in ways they shouldn't. Clara's heart beat faster as the realization sank in she wasn't alone anymore. The past keepers, those who had once failed, were still here, trapped in the lighthouse, their spirits woven into its walls. The temperature dropped sharply, and Clara's breath became visible in the thickening mist. She turned to see the figure of the doppelganger slowly fading away, leaving behind only the faint sound of the lullaby in the air. As she looked around, the shadows began to take shape, shifting into the forms of past keepers who had once walked the same path she was now on. Their faces were hollow, their eyes filled with sorrow and regret, forever etched into the walls of the lighthouse. "You are not the first to make this mistake," one of them whispered, his voice barely audible but full of ancient pain. Clara's heart raced as she realized the truth. Each keeper before her had been trapped, their souls bound to the lighthouse by the very power she had unlocked. She was now one of them, a part of the lighthouse's eternal cycle, destined to guard its secrets forever. The doppelganger's voice echoed once more, but this time it was filled with sadness. "You were warned, Clara. The lighthouse feeds on the hearts of those who seek its power. Once you open the door, there's no going back." Clara felt a sharp pang in her chest as the realization hit her like a bolt of lightning. The heart of the lighthouse, the heart of all its power, was not just a force to control, it was a price to pay. Her hands shook, and she felt herself being pulled toward the lighthouse's core. It was as if the very air was alive with energy, demanding her compliance. She could see the glowing crystal at the heart of the lighthouse now, its light pulsating in time with the rhythm of her own heart. But as she moved closer, the faces of the past keepers appeared in the shadows, warning her to stop. They were pleading with her, their voices echoing in the halls, but Clara felt powerless to resist. She had already made her choice. The lullaby swirled around Clara once again, but this time it was no longer soft and comforting. The song was frantic, desperate, as if the lighthouse itself was crying out. The melody twisted in her mind, becoming a haunting, mournful dirge. The voices of the past keepers joined in, their cries blending with the lullaby's melody. The song was no longer just a lullaby, it was a curse, a song that bound all those who heard it to the lighthouse, trapping them in its endless cycle. Clara's vision blurred as the song intensified. The walls of the lighthouse seemed to close in around her, and she felt the weight of its power pressing down on her chest. The energy in the lighthouse grew unbearable, and for a moment Clara thought she might be consumed by it. But she held on, her hand reaching for the crystal, the source of all this power, the source of her fate. Clara's fingers brushed the cold surface of the crystal, and a flood of memories rushed through her. She saw the past keepers, their lives, their struggles, their fall. She saw their faces, once filled with hope and ambition, now hollow and broken. Each one of them had sought to control the lighthouse's power, and each had failed. And now Clara was part of their tragic story. The crystal pulsed with a dark energy, and Clara felt it seep into her, filling her with a heavy, suffocating feeling. She understood now that the power of the lighthouse wasn't just a gift, it was a curse, a burden that could never be undone. She had become the newest keeper, her soul forever bound to the lighthouse, just like all those who had come before her. The lullaby played its final, mournful note, sealing her fate for eternity. Clara's breath came in ragged gasps as the last of the power coursed through her. She felt the weight of the lighthouse settle deep into her bones, and for the first time she understood the true meaning of the lullaby. It wasn't a song of comfort, it was a song of warning. The lighthouse had claimed her, as it had claimed so many before. And now she was its eternal guardian, the secret keeper, forever bound to its light. The whispers of the past keepers faded into the background, their voices becoming part of the lullaby's haunting refrain. Clara closed her eyes, the music filling her mind. The lighthouse was her prison now, and there was no escape. As the final echoes of the lullaby faded into the night, Clara knew that the lighthouse's secret would never be revealed. It would remain hidden, locked away in the shadows, forever protected by the keeper it had claimed. Clara stood in the center of the lighthouse, the weight of her new reality sinking in. The once vibrant world outside had faded into darkness, and the only light left was the soft, pulsing glow from the crystal. The whispers of the past keepers circled around her, their presence no longer a frightening force, but a constant companion. She had become one of them, bound to the lighthouse's ancient power, guarding its secrets forever. The lullaby echoed softly in her ears, a reminder of the price she had paid. As the days blurred together, Clara knew there was no turning back. She had entered this place seeking answers, but now she was part of the lighthouse's eternal story, her soul forever tied to its light. The passage of time no longer mattered. She was a keeper now, destined to watch over the secrets of the haunted lighthouse for as long as the song continued to play. And then, one quiet night, the lullaby stopped. The lighthouse grew silent, its light flickering once, before it became still. Clara felt the shift in the air, a final breath from the lighthouse itself. For the first time since she had arrived, she wasn't surrounded by the whispers of the past keepers. The lullaby's last note hung in the air like a fading echo, and Clara knew that her duty had ended. The lighthouse's story had been told, and its secrets were finally laid to rest. Clara walked to the edge of the lighthouse, looking out over the vast, dark sea. For a brief moment she felt free. The weight of her eternal watch had lifted, and the past keepers were no longer with her. The light of the lighthouse was dim, its power finally faded. Clara smiled softly, knowing that the haunted lighthouse had been set free from its curse. And as she stepped into the darkness, she knew that the lullaby would live on in her heart, a secret song only she would ever truly understand. Thank you for joining us on this peaceful journey. We hope this story helped you unwind and drift closer to a restful night's sleep. Remember, sweet dreams are just a story away, and we'll be here whenever you need a soothing escape. If you enjoyed this bedtime tale, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more calming stories to help you relax. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, let the peaceful lull of our stories guide you into a restful sleep. Good night, and may your dreams be filled with tranquility.